Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Luther Grimhart, but everyone calls me Luke. I've been a park ranger for 16 years now, and I've seen things out here in the Alaska wilderness that would make most people pack up and head back to the city. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what I found in February of 1974. I was stationed at Yukon Charlie Rivers National Preserve, about as far from civilization as you can get without falling off the edge of the world. 300 miles of frozen, nothing between me and the nearest town. Just me, my radio, and more emptiness than a person should have to deal with. The call came in on a Tuesday morning. The temperature had been sitting at 50 below for a week straight, the kind of cold that makes your spit freeze before it hits the ground. My supervisor's voice crackled through the radio static. "Luke, we got a missing family, the Morrisons. 5 of them parents, 3 kids. Last check-in was 6 days ago, near the old mining camps up the Prez. Yukon River Valley. I knew those camps. Abandoned gold mines from the 1800s, nothing left but rotting timber and rusted equipment. No place for a family to be camping in winter, but people did stupid things sometimes." "How long they been out there?" I asked, already pulling on my gear. 2 weeks total. Tom Morrison's an experienced winter camper. But the radio popped and hissed. "Just find them, Luke. Fast." I loaded my pack with everything I might need. My rifle, .308 that had been with me since Vietnam, extra ammunition, survival gear, medical supplies, food for a week, though I hoped I wouldn't need that long. The thing about being alone out here is that your mind starts playing tricks on you, especially when you've got the kind of background I have. 3 tours in Vietnam, special forces, sniper division. I'd killed more men than I cared to count, and sometimes, in the quiet of the wilderness, I could still hear their voices. My colleagues back at headquarters thought I was a little too intense. They weren't wrong. I volunteered for the dangerous jobs, the ones that might require my particular skills. There was something in me that missed the hunt, missed the feeling of having a target in my crosshairs. But out here, the only things to hunt were animals, and that had stopped being enough a long time ago. I strapped on my snowshoes and started north toward the mining camps. The snow was deep over 10 feet in some places, and the world was painted in nothing but white and gray. No wind, no sound except the crunch of my shoes and my own breathing. After 6 hours of travel, I found their first campsite. The tent was still standing, which was a good sign. But as I got closer, something felt wrong. The snow around the tent was disturbed, churned up like there had been a struggle. Dark stains that looked like blood were scattered in a wide circle. I called out, "Hello, Tom Morrison? Anyone there?" Nothing but echoes, bouncing off the distant mountains. The tent flaps were shredded. Not cut clean like a knife would do, but torn raggedly from the inside. Like something had clawed its way out in a panic. I found sleeping bags, camping gear, even food supplies still packed away. Whatever happened here, it happened fast. But there were no bodies. I found tracks leading away from the camp. Boot prints, definitely human, but wrong somehow. They started normal enough, but after about 50 yards, they started changing. Getting longer. The stride was too wide for any person I'd ever seen. An old memory tickled the back of my brain. Stories the local Athabascan people used to tell. Legends about something called a Wedico, a creature born from starvation and desperation that turned people into cannibals. But those were just stories, weren't they? The tracks led north, deeper into the mining country. I followed them as the short winter days started to fade. That's when I heard it for the first time, a sound that made my blood freeze colder than the air around me. Screaming. Human screaming, echoing from somewhere up ahead. But there was something wrong with it. It went on too long, hit notes too high and too low for any normal voice. I unslung my rifle and checked the action. Whatever was out there, whatever had happened to the Morrison family, I was going to find it. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get to use these skills the Army had taught me on something that deserved it. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it had started. In the silence that followed, I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I was scared, sure, but underneath the fear was something else. Something that felt almost like excitement. I had a hunt ahead of me. The tracks led me through a maze of abandoned mine shafts and crumbling wooden structures. This place had been dead for almost 100 years, but it felt like something was watching me from the shadows. Every step I took seemed too loud in the frozen silence. I found her just before dark. Jessica Morrison, 8 years old, according to the missing persons report. She was lying in a snowbank about 50 yards from the largest mine entrance, and at first I thought maybe she'd just frozen to death. Kids sometimes wandered off from camp, got lost, succumbed to the cold. But when I got closer, I saw the truth. Something had been eating her. I've seen death before. I've caused death before. In Vietnam, I learned to disconnect my emotions when I looked at bodies. But this was different. The bite marks were clearly human. I could see the tooth patterns in the frozen flesh, but they were too big, too deep. Like someone with the jaw strength of a bear but the dental structure of a person. The strange part was how I felt looking at her. I should have been horrified, sick, angry. Instead, I felt a weird excitement building in my chest. Like I was looking at the work of a master, craftsman, the precision of it, the systematic way the flesh had been removed. I shook my head, trying to clear those thoughts. This was a dead child, for God's sake. What was wrong with me? I radioed back to headquarters. Found one of the Morrison kids, 8-year-old girl. She's dead. Looks like animal attack, but what, Luke? I don't know. Something's not right here. I'm going to keep searching. Copy that. Be careful out there. I covered Jessica's body with my spare tarp and marked the location. Her parents would want to bury her properly, assuming I could find them alive. But deep down, I was starting to suspect that wasn't going to happen. The tracks continued past Jessica's body, leading toward the main mining complex. These old camps were built into the mountainside, with tunnels that went back for miles. Perfect place to hide if something was hunting you. Also, perfect place to get trapped if that something found you. I had a flashlight, but I was reluctant to use it. Light would give away my position to whatever was out there. Better to let my eyes adjust and move quietly. My sniper training kicked in: slow, deliberate movement, careful foot placement, constant awareness of my surroundings. The mine entrance loomed ahead of me like a mouth. The wooden support beams were rotted and sagging, icicles hanging down like teeth. I could smell something coming from inside, something rotten and sweet. More screaming echoed from the depths of the tunnel. This time I could tell it was a man's voice, probably Tom Morrison. But it cut off suddenly, ending in a wet, choking sound that made my stomach turn. I checked my rifle again and started into the mine. The smell got stronger as I went deeper. Death and decay, but also something else. Something that reminded me of a butcher shop. The tunnel branched off in several directions, and I had to follow the sound of footsteps and low growling to know which way to go. I found Tom Morrison in a side chamber about 100 yards into the mine. He was hanging upside down from a wooden beam, strung up like a deer during hunting season. His throat had been cut, and most of the blood had drained out onto the frozen ground below. But that wasn't the worst part. Someone had been butchering him, systematically removing meat in clean, precise cuts. Not the frenzied tearing I'd expect from a wild animal, but careful work, like someone who knew what they were doing. I heard movement behind me and spun around, rifle ready. Nothing there but shadows and the echo of my own breathing. But I had the distinct feeling I was being watched. "Hello?" I called out softly. "Mrs. Morrison? Kids, are you in here?" A sound came back that raised every hair on my body. Low laughter, almost human, but not quite. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, bouncing off the tunnel walls. That's when I saw the footprints in the sandy floor. The same tracks I'd been following, but now I could see them clearly. They started out human-sized, but as they went deeper into the mine, they got longer and wider. The toe impressions showed claws instead of normal toenails. Whatever I was hunting, it wasn't entirely human anymore. I followed the tracks deeper into the mine, past more side chambers and abandoned equipment. The smell was getting stronger, and now I could hear sounds ahead of me, wet, tearing noises, like someone eating. Part of me knew I should turn around, get out of there, call for backup. But a bigger part of me was excited by the hunt. This was what I'd been missing since Vietnam. A real enemy, something dangerous that needed to be stopped. And if it happened to be something that deserved killing, well, that was just a bonus. The tunnel opened up into a large chamber, probably where they used to store equipment. My eyes had adjusted enough to make out shapes in the darkness. And what I saw there made me understand that the Morrison family was never going home. 3 more bodies, Ann Morrison and the 2 boys, Mike and Tommy. But Mike was moving. He was crouched over his baby brother's body, tearing at the flesh with his teeth and fingernails. His face was smeared with blood, and when he looked up at me, his eyes reflected light like an animal's. "Mike?" I whispered. He snarled and launched himself at me. I barely got my rifle up in time. Mike Morrison hit me like a wild animal, clawing and biting, trying to get at my throat. He was only 15 years old, but he had the strength of someone twice his size. His fingernails had grown into claws, and his teeth looked sharp and wrong. I managed to get the rifle barrel between us and shove him back. He rolled away and crouched in the shadows, watching me with those glowing eyes. "Mike, it's okay," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm here to help. I'm a park ranger." He tilted his head like a confused dog. When he spoke, his voice was rough and broken. "So hungry?" he whispered. "Always hungry. Nothing helps. Nothing stops it." "What happened to your family, Mike? What did this to you?" The thing in the tunnels. It bit me. Made me bite the others. Made us all so hungry." He looked down at his little brother's body. "Tommy was the last. I tried to stop, but I couldn't. The hunger is too strong. I kept my rifle trained on him, but I felt sorry for the kid. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't his fault. He was as much a victim as the rest of his family." "Where is it now?" I asked. "The thing that bit you?" Mike's eyes went wide with fear. "Deeper. In the old shafts. It's waiting for you. It smells your hunger too." "What do you mean?" "The killing hunger. You have it. I can smell it on you. That's why it led you here. It wants to make you like us." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "You're wrong, kid. I'm here to help." But even as I said it, I knew he wasn't wrong. There was something inside me that had enjoyed looking at the bodies. Something that was interested in the precision of the butchery, the skill involved in taking apart a human being piece by piece. Mike lunged at me again. This time I was ready. The rifle shot echoed through the chamber like thunder. The bullet took him center mass and spun him around. He hit the ground and didn't get up. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, looking down at what was left of the Morrison family. All dead now. All of them, victims of something that shouldn't exist. But as I stared at Mike's body, I felt that strange excitement again. The satisfaction of a clean kill, a target eliminated. And underneath that, a new feeling I didn't want to acknowledge. Hunger. Not regular hunger I'd eaten before I left that morning. This was something different. A craving for something I'd never wanted before. When I looked at Mike's blood, spreading across the frozen ground, my mouth watered. I backed away from the body, horrified by my own thoughts. What was happening to me? That's when I heard the footsteps in the deeper tunnels. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. And with them came a voice, low and raspy but definitely human. "Good," it called out. "You killed the boy. You liked it. I can smell your satisfaction. Who are you?" I shouted into the darkness. "What did you do to that family?" Laughter echoed back at me. I showed them the truth. The hunger that lives inside all of us. The hunger for meat, for blood, for the hunt. "You know this hunger, soldier. You've fed it before." Images from Vietnam flashed through my mind. The satisfaction I'd felt when a target dropped. The way I'd volunteered for the most dangerous missions, hoping for a chance to use my skills. The way killing had made me feel more alive than anything else. "You're sick," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "I'm free," the voice replied. "Free from the lies that society tells us about what we really are. We're hunters, not farmers. Predators, not prey." The boy understood this before he died. His family understood. Soon you will too. The footsteps were getting closer. I could see a shape moving in the deeper tunnel, but it was wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. Moving in a way that human joints shouldn't allow. "I know what you are," I called out. "Wediko. The hunger spirit. Smart man." "Yes, I was human once, trapped in these mines during the winter of 1847. My partners and I ran out of food. The snow was too deep to leave. We made difficult choices. The shape stepped into the chamber, and I got my first clear look at it. It had been human once, but starvation and something worse had changed it. It stood almost 12 feet tall, but was so thin it looked like a skeleton wrapped in gray skin. Its arms and legs were too long, ending in clawed hands and feet. Its face was gaunt and hollow, with black holes where its eyes should be and a mouth full of sharp, broken teeth. I ate my partners, it continued in that rasping voice. All of them. And when the rescue party found me in the spring, I ate them too. The hunger never stopped after that. It grew and grew until it became bigger than my human self. Now I am the hunger, and I spread it to others. The Morrison family fed me for a while, but they weren't enough. I need someone stronger, someone who already knows the joy of killing. Its empty eye sockets turned toward me. Someone like you. I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet hit center mass, but the creature barely flinched. It smiled with those broken teeth. Bullets can't stop hunger, it said, and started moving toward me. I fired again and again, backing toward the tunnel entrance. Some of the shots hit, some missed, but none of them seemed to slow the thing down. And with each step it took, I could feel something changing inside me. The hunger was getting stronger. I ran through the mine tunnels with the Wedico behind me, its claws scraping against the stone walls as it moved. But I wasn't just running from it, I was running from what I could feel happening inside myself. The hunger was spreading through my body like poison. My stomach cramped and twisted, empty no matter how much I tried to ignore it. And it wasn't food I was craving. When I thought about the Morrison family, about Mike's blood on the ground, my mouth filled with saliva, I burst out of the mine entrance into the frozen night. The temperature hit me like a physical blow, but I kept running. Behind me, I could hear the creature following, moving through the snow like it weighed nothing. "You can't run from what you are," it called after me. "I can smell the change in you. Your body knows what it needs." I made it about a mile before my legs gave out. I collapsed in a snowbank, gasping for air that felt like knives in my lungs. When I tried to stand, my legs wouldn't support me. They felt different somehow, longer. I looked down at my hands and almost screamed. My fingers had stretched out, and my fingernails had grown into sharp claws. When I touched my face, I could feel that my jaw had extended forward, and my teeth felt too big for my mouth. The Wedico caught up to me and stood looking down at my changing body. Up close, I could see the intelligence in those black eye sockets. This wasn't just a monster, it was a person who had chosen to become something worse. "How does it feel?" it asked. "The hunger? The strength? The clarity?" I tried to speak, but my voice came out as a growl. The changes were happening faster now. I could feel my spine stretching, my ribs expanding. Every nerve in my body was on fire. But underneath the pain was something else, a sense of aptory, rightness, like this was what I had always been meant to become. I fought it at first too, the creature said, tried to hold on to my human self. But why? Humans are weak. They pretend they don't want to hurt each other, but then they create wars and murders and all kinds of violence. At least we're honest about what we are. Images flashed through my mind. Every person I'd killed in Vietnam. The satisfaction I'd felt with each confirmed kill. The way I'd volunteered for the most dangerous missions, hoping for more chances to use my rifle. The secret excitement I'd felt looking at the Morrison family's bodies. Maybe it was right. Maybe this was just who I'd always been. "The boy saw it in you immediately," the Wedico continued. "The hunger, that's why his family had to die. I needed them to draw you here. You're going to be my partner, my hunter. Together we'll spread the hunger across this whole wilderness." I tried to fight the transformation, but my body wouldn't obey me anymore. My arms and legs continued to stretch and change. My human thoughts were getting harder to hold on to, replaced by simpler urges. Hunt, feed, kill. But then I remembered something, a conversation I'd had with an old Athabascan man back when I first got this job. He'd told me about the Wedico, but also about how to fight it. "Fire," I managed to whisper through my changing throat. "Wedico fears fire." The creature's smile faded. Fire won't save you now. You're too far along. In a few more minutes, you'll be just like me. And then we'll hunt together." I reached into my pack with hands that were barely hands anymore. My emergency flare was still there. With fingers that now ended in claws, I managed to pull the igniter. Red light filled the clearing as the flare burst into life. The Wedico shrieked and backed away, covering its face with those impossibly long arms. "Fire purifies," I growled, my voice barely human now. "Burns away the hunger." I pressed the flare against my own chest. The pain was incredible. Every nerve in my body screamed, as the fire burned through my jacket and into my flesh. But I could feel the transformation slowing, stopping. The hunger that had been consuming me from the inside began to fade. The Wedico lunged at me, trying to knock the flare away. Its claws raked across my face, but I held on. We rolled in the snow together, the flare burning between us. Where the fire touched its skin, the creature's flesh began to smoke and bubble. "You don't understand," it screamed. "The hunger is a gift. It makes you free." "The hunger is a curse," I gasped back, "and I won't let you spread it anymore." I managed to get the flare against its chest. The creature's screams echoed across the wilderness as the fire ate into its body. It tried to pull away, but I held on with what was left of my strength. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. The Wedico's struggles grew weaker and weaker until finally it stopped moving altogether. Its body crumbled into ash that scattered in the wind. I lay in the snow, badly burned but alive. Human. The hunger was gone, burned out of me by the fire. My body had stopped changing, though I would carry the scars, physical and mental, for the rest of my life. When I could finally stand, I looked around at the empty wilderness. No trace of the creature remained except for a dark stain in the snow. The Morrison family was still dead, but at least the thing that killed them was gone too. I started the long walk back to my station, using my radio to call for a recovery team. I would tell them that the family had been killed by a bear, that I'd tracked it down and killed it. No one would believe the truth anyway. But as I walked through the frozen night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That somewhere out there in the darkness, other hungry things were waiting. The Wedico had told me it needed a partner. What if there were others like it? What if the hunger I'd felt was still out there, looking for a new host? I picked up my pace, eager to get back to the warmth and light of civilization, but I knew I would never really leave this place behind. Part of me would always be in those mine tunnels, fighting against the hunger that tried to claim my soul. And sometimes, in my weakest moments, I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't found that flare. That was 48 years ago, but I still think about it every day. The official report said the Morrison family died in an avalanche. Their bodies were never recovered because I told the rescue team the mine had collapsed, sealing off the tunnels. It was easier than explaining what I'd really found in there. I stayed on as a ranger for another 10 years, but I was never the same. The scars from the flare covered most of my chest, and I walked with a limp from the changes that had started in my legs. But the worst damage was inside my head. I kept having dreams about the Wetico, about the hunger. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night with my mouth watering, craving something I couldn't name. Those were the nights I would sit by my fireplace until dawn, watching the flames and remembering how fire had saved my soul. The nightmares got worse over the years instead of better. I started drinking to make them stop, but that just made everything else worse. Eventually, I had to retire and move to a small town in Montana, as far from the wilderness as I could get. But the wilderness followed me anyway. Every few years, I would hear reports on the news. Hikers found dead in remote areas, their bodies showing signs of cannibalization. Campers who disappeared completely, leaving behind only bloody campsites. Missing persons cases that never got solved. Most people explained them away as bear attacks or serial killers. But I knew better. I knew what those bite marks really meant. The Wetico I killed wasn't the only one. There were others out there, spreading their hunger to anyone desperate or violent enough to be infected. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind was howling outside my windows, I wondered if I'd really burned all of the hunger out of myself. I never had a family, never trusted myself to be around people for too long. What if the infection was still inside me, just waiting for the right moment to resurface? What if I passed it on to someone I cared about? But I also never stopped fighting it. I kept emergency flares in every room of my house. I volunteered at the local fire department, finding comfort in being around fire and the people who fought it. And whenever I heard about one of those unexplained deaths in the wilderness, I would send anonymous tips to the authorities, suggesting they look for signs of human bite marks, telling them to be careful of anyone who survived when others didn't. I'm 72 now, too old to go hunting monsters in the wilderness. My hands shake too much to hold a rifle steady, and my legs can barely carry me up a flight of stairs, but I still keep watch. Last month, a young park ranger came to visit me. Said he'd heard I used to work up in Alaska, wanted some advice about a case he was working on. Missing family near Denali. Bodies found with unusual bite marks. I told him what I could without mentioning the supernatural parts. How to track in the wilderness, how to tell animal attacks from human violence, how to stay safe when you're hunting something dangerous. But before he left, I gave him something else. A box of emergency flares and some advice that probably sounded crazy. If you find whatever did this, I told him, and it talks to you. If it tries to make you understand its point of view, don't listen. And if you start feeling hungry in a way that food won't fix, you light one of these flares and you burn that feeling right out of yourself. You understand me? He looked at me like I was a crazy old man, but he took the flares. I hope he never has to use them. But if he does, I hope he remembers what I told him, because the truth is, the hunger never really goes away. It just waits. In the deep places of the world, in the hearts of people who have killed and liked it, in the spaces between civilization and wilderness where anything can happen, I've spent almost 50 years keeping it at bay. When I die, someone else will have to take over. Maybe that young ranger? Maybe someone else who's strong enough to fight the hunger and smart enough to know when fire is the only answer. The Wetico is still out there. Maybe not the same one I killed, but others like it. Waiting in the cold and the dark for people desperate enough or hungry enough to listen to their whispers. And as long as there are people who enjoy violence, who feel that secret satisfaction when they cause pain, the hunger will keep spreading. All we can do is fight it. One flame at a time. The wind is picking up outside my house tonight, howling through the trees like voices calling from a great distance. I'm going to build up the fire and keep watch until dawn. Just like I have every night for the past 48 years. Just like I will for whatever time I have left. Because some hungers never end. They just wait. My name is Marcus Steelclaw, but everyone calls me Mark. I've been a park ranger for 12 years now, working the wild places where most people never go. Alaska's Kobuk Valley National Park is about as remote as it gets. Nothing but sand dunes and cold wind for miles in every direction. People always ask me how I do this job with my hearing the way it is. Lost most of it in my left ear during a hunting accident when I was 21. Stupid mistake with a rifle that changed my whole life. But here's the thing nobody understands. Losing my hearing made me better at seeing things, really seeing them. When you can't rely on sound to tell you what's happening, your eyes learn to catch everything. I keep a notepad in my pocket for when I need to talk to people, and my hearing aid isn't enough. Most of the time out here, though, it's just me and the wind. That's how I like it. It was March 1989 when Dr. Sarah Kim's research team went quiet. They'd been studying some old Inupiat settlement ruins buried in the sand dunes for about 2 weeks. Smart people from the university, looking at how ancient folks lived in this harsh place. They had permission to camp out there for a month, and everything was going fine until their radio calls stopped. Jake Northstar flies supplies to the teams working out here. He's a bush pilot who knows these lands better than anyone. When he came back from what should have been a routine supply drop, his face was white as snow. I saw them, he told me, writing it down when he noticed I was struggling to hear him over the plane engine. The whole team was waving at me from the dunes, but when I landed at their camp, nobody was there. All their stuff was still set up, food still warm in the pot, but no people. That made my skin crawl. In 12 years of ranger work, I'd seen people get lost, get hurt, even get killed by bears or the weather, but I'd never seen anything like what Jake was describing. Maybe they went exploring and just got back after you left? I wrote back. Jake shook his head hard. I circled back 3 times, Kept seeing them wave, but every time I landed, the camp was empty. Mark, something's not right out there. I packed my gear that afternoon, standard survival stuff, plus my binoculars and extra batteries for my hearing aid. The weather was turning one of those sudden spring changes where the temperature drops 20 degrees and the wind picks up. If the team was in trouble, we didn't have much time. The flight out to the dunes took 40 minutes. Below us, the Kobuk Valley spread out like something from another planet. Most people think of Alaska as all trees and mountains, but this place is different. Sand dunes stretch for miles, shifting and changing with every storm. In winter, it looks like a frozen desert. Jake set me down at the research camp as the sun was getting low. The first thing I noticed was how neat everything looked. Tents arranged in a perfect line, equipment organized just so. The fire pit had cold ashes, but there was still food laid out like someone had just stepped away for a minute. "I'll be back in a week," Jake called out as his engine started up. "Radio if you need me sooner." I waved and watched his plane disappear into the gray sky. Then it was just me and the silence. That's when I noticed something wrong with the quiet. See, there's always some kind of sound out here. Wind, moving sand, your own breathing, maybe a bird in the distance. But this was different. This was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Even the one that still works. I walked through the camp, looking at everything carefully. Dr. Kim's notebook was open on a folding table, her handwriting neat and precise. The last entry was from 3 days ago. Remarkable preservation in the buried structures. Found carved warnings about shapeshifters. Local legends may have basis, in fact, shapeshifters. I knew a little about the old stories from my grandmother, who was part Inupiat. She used to tell me about the Qualipiluit spirits that could steal your voice, your face, even your whole identity. Just stories to keep kids from wandering too far from home, I'd always thought. But standing there in that empty camp, with the wind starting to pick up and sand beginning to swirl around my feet, those old stories didn't feel so made up anymore. I set up my own tent downwind from the research camp and built a fire as darkness fell. The temperature was dropping fast, and I could see my breath in the flickering light. My hearing aid picked up the usual sounds: wind, crackling wood, the rustle of my sleeping bag. Normal sounds that made me feel better about being alone out here. That's when I heard Dr. Kim calling for help. Her voice came through my hearing aid clear as day, scared and desperate. "Help us! We're lost in the dunes. Can anyone hear us?" I grabbed my flashlight and stood up, looking around the camp. "Dr. Kim, where are you? Please, we're so cold. We've been walking for hours. Can you see our light?" I spun around, shining my flashlight in every direction. Nothing but sand and darkness. The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Keep talking," I called out. "I'll follow your voice." But then I heard Dr. Kim's voice again, coming from a completely different direction. "Help us. We're trapped. The sand keeps shifting." 2 voices, same person. That wasn't possible. I turned my hearing aid up to maximum and listened carefully. Now I could hear all of them: Dr. Kim, Dr. Martinez, the 2 graduate students. All calling for help, all from different directions, all at the same time. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my radio. "Jake, this is Mark. Do you copy?" Static. Then Jake's voice. "I'm here, Mark. Find anything?" I can hear them calling for help, but I can't see them anywhere. Something's really wrong out here. Copy that. Want me to come back? I was about to say yes when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Footprints in the sand around my fire, clearly visible in the light. But they weren't just any footprints, they were mine. My exact boot prints, same size, same tread pattern. But I'd been sitting by the fire for the last hour. I hadn't walked around it. "Mark, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Give me until morning, Jake. If you don't hear from me by dawn, come looking." I clicked off the radio and studied those footprints more carefully. They formed a perfect circle around my fire, like someone wearing my exact boots had walked around and around while I sat there. But the really strange part was that there were too many of them. Way too many steps for just walking in a circle. The voices kept calling all night. Sometimes they were far away, sometimes so close it seemed like someone was standing right next to me. I kept my flashlight ready and my eyes moving, but I never saw anyone. The voices would start from one direction, then move to another. like whatever was making them could travel faster than anything human. Around midnight, I heard something that made me sick to my stomach. My grandmother's voice, speaking in the mix of English and Inupiat she used when she told stories. "Marcus, you need to listen to the old warnings. The shapeshifters are real, child. They take what isn't theirs." My grandmother had been dead for 5 years. I stopped answering the voices after that. Instead, I focused on what I could see. The sand around the camp was covered in tracks now, human footprints going in every direction, but all the same size as mine. Like a whole group of people wearing identical boots had been walking around in the dark. When the sun came up, the voices stopped. But the tracks were still there, clear as day in the morning light. I followed one set that led away from camp, toward the buried settlement. Dr. Kim had been studying. The ruins were about half a mile into the dunes, mostly covered by sand but with some stone walls still visible. Ancient Inupiat construction, probably hundreds of years old. Dr. Kim's excavation site was easy to find, careful squares marked with string, tools laid out neatly, notebooks protected by plastic covers. I found her body in the largest excavated room. Dr. Kim was lying on her side, eyes closed, looking almost peaceful, except for the expression on her face. Pure terror, frozen like she'd died seeing something horrible. No wounds, no blood. She just looked like she'd been scared to death. But as I stood there, looking down at her, I heard her voice again, calling from somewhere out in the dunes. "Help us! We're so cold. We've been walking for hours." The exact same words, in the exact same tone, coming from the exact same Dr. Kim who was lying dead at my feet. I ran back to my radio, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Jake, come in." "I'm here, Mark." "What's wrong?" "Dr. Kim is dead, but I can still hear her voice. Something killed her, and it's using her voice to call for help. You need to get out here now." Long pause. Then Jake's voice, but different somehow. Flatter. "I can't come today, Mark. Weather's too bad." I looked up at the clear blue sky and knew that whatever I was talking to, it wasn't Jake. I found the rest of the team over the next 2 hours. Dr. Martinez, behind a sand dune. The 2 graduate students, in what looked like an ancient storage room. All dead, all with that same look of absolute terror on their faces. No wounds, no signs of struggle. Just fear that had literally killed them. But I could hear all of them calling for help from different parts of the dunes. The worst part was watching the thing learn. At first, the voices just repeated the same phrases over and over. "Help us, we're lost. So cold." But as the day went on, they got more creative. More like real conversation. "Mark, is that you?" "Doctor." Kim's voice called from a ridge about 50 yards away. "Thank God you're here. Something's been hunting us." I looked through my binoculars and saw her standing there. Dr. Kim, exactly as I remembered her. Same height, same hair, same blue jacket she'd been wearing in the camp photos. She was waving at me with both hands. "Where are the others?" I called back. "Dead, all dead. This thing, it looks like us, but it's not us. You have to help me get out of here." Everything she was saying made sense. Everything looked right. But Dr. Kim was lying dead in the ruins behind me. I kept my binoculars on her while she talked, studying every detail. That's when I noticed it, she wasn't blinking. Not once. And when she moved her arms, the motion was just a little too smooth. Like someone operating a puppet that was almost but not quite human. "Come down here," I called. "We'll go back to camp together." The Dr. Kim thing started walking down the dune toward me. As it got closer, I could see more problems. It walked too straight, like it was on rails. Its face never changed expression, and its eyes never looked away from mine, not even when stepping over rocks or rough ground. When it got about 20 feet away, I turned and ran. Behind me, Dr. Kim's voice changed. It got angry. "Mark, don't leave me. Mark, come back. Mark." But underneath her voice, I could hear something else. A sound that made my teeth ache and my skin crawl, like wind blowing through a tunnel, or maybe like something very large, breathing. I ran back to my camp and grabbed my radio. "Jake, if you're really Jake, you need to listen to me. Don't land here. Don't come anywhere near this place. There's something here that copies people." "Mark, you're not making sense. I'm coming to get you." What's my grandmother's name? I asked. Long pause. I don't know, Mark. You never told me. The real Jake knew my grandmother. He'd met her at the ranger station Christmas party 2 years before she died. Her name was Anna. You're not Jake, I said into the radio. The thing on the radio laughed. It was Jake's laugh, but it went on too long and got too high at the end. That afternoon, I started seeing multiple versions of the same people. 2 Dr. Kims standing on different dunes, both waving. 3 Dr. Martinez's walking in a line like a parade, a whole group of graduate students moving through the sand like a pack of wolves. But the thing that scared me most happened just before sunset. I was studying the ancient carvings that Dr. Kim had uncovered, trying to understand what the warnings actually said. My grandmother had taught me a little I knew Piet when I was young, enough to pick out some words. The carvings talked about voice stealers that came in the spring, spirits that would take the sounds people made and use them to hunt. The old people had a word for them, Qualipiluit. But these weren't the water spirits from the stories I knew. These were land spirits, something that lived in the deep sand and came up when the weather changed. As I was reading, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw myself. It was like looking in a mirror, except the mirror was standing 10 feet away and staring at me. Same face, same clothes, same everything, but its eyes were wrong. They were my eyes, but they were looking at me like I was something to eat. Hello, Mark, it said in my voice. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like every nightmare I'd ever had about meeting an evil twin, except this was real, and it was happening. You can't hear very well, can you? My own voice asked. That makes you special, unique. I like unique things. The fake, Mark tilted its head, studying me. The others were easy. Fear makes people weak, makes them make mistakes. But you're different. You've been watching me, haven't you? Seeing the little problems with my copying. I managed to nod. I've been watching you too, it said. Learning how you move, how you think. Soon I'll know everything about you. And then, I won't need the real Mark anymore. It smiled with my face, and that's when I knew I was going to die. I ran into the dunes as night fell, with my own voice calling after me. Mark, don't run from yourself. We should talk about this. The thing could copy my appearance perfectly, but it couldn't copy my knowledge. I knew these dunes from 12 years of ranger work. I knew where the sand was firm and where it was soft, where the wind carved channels and where it built walls. More importantly, I knew something it didn't, my grandmother's stories about fighting the Qualipiluit. You can't hide from yourself, Mark, my voice called from somewhere behind me. I can smell your fear. I kept moving, using hand signals and visual landmarks to navigate in the dark. My flashlight stayed. Off-light would just make me an easier target. Instead, I relied on starlight and my knowledge of the terrain. The voices started multiplying again. Now I could hear Jake calling to me, Dr. Kim, Dr. Martinez, even my dead grandmother. But underneath them all was my own voice, getting closer. I've been thinking about your life, Mark, my voice said from somewhere to my left. 12 years as a ranger. No wife, no kids, just you and the empty places. Kind of sad, really. I kept moving, trying to remember everything my grandmother had told me about the old spirits. The thing about being you, my voice continued, now from my right, is that nobody will miss you when you're gone. I can walk into town wearing your face, and everyone will just see good old reliable Mark. The voice was closer now, maybe 30 yards away. I crouched behind a ridge and tried to think. My grandmother had said that shapeshifters couldn't perfectly copy everything about a person. There was always something wrong, something that gave them away. I know you can hear me, Mark. Your hearing aid is on maximum. I can hear it whistling from here. That's when I realized the creature's mistake. My hearing aid had been acting up all week, making a high-pitched whine when turned up too high. But I'd learned to position my head just right to stop the feedback. The creature might know about the hearing aid, but it didn't know the little tricks I used. I reached up and adjusted my hearing aid, tilting my head the way I always did. The whistling stopped. There you are, my voice said, much closer now. I spun around and saw myself standing about 10 feet away. Perfect copy, down to the way I held my shoulders and the small scar on my chin from a childhood accident. Impressive, isn't it? The fake Mark said. I've been practicing. You got one thing wrong, I said. What's that? I pointed to its hearing aid. You're wearing it on the wrong ear. For just a second, the thing looked confused. Its hand went to its left ear, the one that worked fine. My hearing aid was on my right ear, the one that was damaged. In that second of confusion, I tackled it. Fighting yourself is the strangest thing you can imagine. Every move I made, it tried to counter with the same move. Every punch I threw, it threw back. But the thing was strong, stronger than any human should be, and as we wrestled in the sand, I could feel it changing under my hands. Its skin got colder, its muscles felt wrong, like they were made of something that wasn't quite flesh. And when it opened its mouth, I could see that its teeth were too sharp and went back too far. "You can't win, Mark," it said in my voice while we struggled. "I'm everything you are, plus more." "Maybe," I gasped, trying to pin its arms. "But I know something you don't." "What?" I pulled out my small mirror, standard survival gear for signaling. "Look at yourself." I held the mirror up so it could see its own reflection. The thing that looked like me stared at its face in the glass and froze. "That's not right," it whispered. In the mirror, its reflection was shifting. 1 second it looked like me, then Dr. Kim, then Jake, then someone I didn't recognize. It couldn't hold one face steady. "You're not really anyone," I said. "You're just a thing that steals pieces of people." The creature started thrashing, its appearance cycling faster and faster through all the faces it had copied. Male, female, old, young, people I knew and people I'd never seen. Its voice changed with each face, creating a horrible chorus of stolen words. "I am real," it screamed in a dozen different voices. "I am all of them. I am." It suddenly went rigid and let out a sound like air escaping from a balloon. Then it just collapsed, like a balloon that had been popped. The stolen faces stopped cycling, and what was left didn't look human anymore. I sat in the sand next to the thing's body and tried to catch my breath. It was over. But as I sat there, I heard something that made my blood freeze all over again. Other voices, calling from deeper in the dunes. Voices I didn't recognize, speaking words I couldn't understand. There wasn't just one of these things. Jake found me the next morning, walking back to camp with the creature's remains in a trash bag. He took one look at my face and didn't ask questions until we were back in town. "What happened out there, Mark?" I told him everything. About the voices, the shapeshifter, the ancient warnings carved in stone. I showed him the body, which looked like nothing more than melted wax by then. "Jesus," he whispered. "What do we do?" "We seal off that area," I said, "permanently, and we watch for signs that there might be others." The official report blamed the research team's deaths on exposure and equipment failure. The site was declared off-limits due to unstable geological conditions. All true, in a way, but I kept the real truth. I developed new protocols for investigating cases where witnesses gave impossible testimony, times when multiple people claimed to see the same person in different places, times when voices called from empty places. My hearing got worse over the next few years, until I had to retire from active duty. But I stayed involved as a consultant, the guy they called when a case didn't make sense, the guy who knew how to spot the little differences that gave the copies away, because there were others. I found evidence of them in missing person cases from remote areas, in stories of people who came home changed, in old legends that weren't really legends. The thing that scared me most wasn't that these creatures existed, it was that they were getting better at copying us. Each one I encountered was more perfect than the last, harder to detect, better at being human. Sometimes I wonder if I've already met one that I couldn't spot. Someone who was just a little too perfect, who never made the small mistakes that real people make. Someone who was wearing a stolen face so well that even I couldn't see through it. The Inupiat word kolopiluit has another meaning I didn't know when I was younger. It doesn't just mean shapeshifter. It means the thing that makes you question who you really are. After what happened in those dunes, I understand why the old people feared them so much. It's not just that they can steal your voice or copy your face. It's that once you know they exist, you start wondering about everyone around you. You start looking for the little signs that someone isn't who they appear to be. You start questioning whether the people you trust are really the people you think they are. And late at night, when I'm alone in my cabin, I sometimes catch myself in the mirror and wonder if the thing that looks back at me is still really Marcus Steelclaw, or if something Wearing my face learned to fool even me. The voices in the dunes went quiet after that spring, but I still listen for them. Because I know they're out there, learning, copying, getting better at being us. And someday, one of them might be perfect enough that nobody, not even someone who knows what to look for, will be able to tell the difference. That's the day we should all be afraid of. The day when the thing that mimics voices learns to mimic souls. My name is Angela Ravensong, but everyone calls me Angie. I've been a park ranger here in Chugach State Park for 7 years now, and before that, I was a nurse for 3 years at Anchorage General. People always ask why I left nursing for this job. The truth is, I got tired of watching people die. In the hospital, no matter how hard I worked, people kept slipping away. Car accidents, heart attacks, overdoses, I'd hold their hands as the life drained out of their eyes. After my 3rd year, I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted a job where I could save people instead of just watching them go. Being a ranger suited me. I knew first aid better than most, and I was good at finding lost hikers before they became bodies. The mountains were honest, dangerous, yes, but in ways you could see coming. A storm, a loose rock, a twisted ankle, things that made sense. It was October 1978, and the fall colors were incredible that year. The birch trees glowed yellow like lanterns, and the mountain ash berries hung bright red against the gray sky. But the ancient spruces in the deep forest stayed dark green, almost black. Some of those trees were over 1,000 years old, standing there since before any white person had ever seen Alaska. The Dena'ina people, who lived here first, had stories about those old trees. My grandmother was half Dena'ina, and she used to whisper about the tree walkers, spirits that lived in the ancient spruces and collected souls like berries. I never paid much attention to those stories until that October. I was alone at the ranger station when the call came in. A woman named Mrs. Walsh was crying on the phone about her daughter Jenny, who'd been hiking in the Thunderbird Creek area and hadn't come back. Jenny was 23, an experienced hiker, and she'd only planned to be out for the day. "She knows these trails better than anyone," Mrs. Walsh sobbed. "Something's wrong. I can feel it." I grabbed my pack, medical kit, rope, emergency supplies, and my radio. My partner Tom was supposed to meet me the next day for a training exercise, but I couldn't wait. If Jenny was hurt somewhere, every hour mattered. The trail to Thunderbird Creek wound through thick forest, where the trees grew so close together that even in daytime, it felt like twilight. The air smelled of moss and rotting leaves, and my boots made soft, squelching sounds in the muddy path. I found Jenny's car parked at the trailhead, just like her mother said. Her backpack was gone, which meant she'd made it to the trail at least. I started hiking, calling her name every few minutes and listening for any response. The trees seemed to swallow my voice. About 2 miles in, I found the first strange thing. Jenny's water bottle was sitting on a flat rock beside the trail, half full and still cold. But there were no signs of a struggle, no blood, nothing to suggest why she'd leave it behind. An experienced hiker never abandons water. I kept going, and that's when I saw the tree. It was massive, even for an old spruce, maybe 6 feet across at the base, reaching up so high I couldn't see the top. The bark was dark and deeply grooved, and there was something wrong with it that I couldn't put my finger on at first. Then I realized what it was. Scattered around the base of the tree were Jenny's things. Her hiking boots, placed neatly side by side, her jacket, folded and set on a moss-covered log, her backpack, empty and turned inside out. But no Jenny. I circled the giant spruce tree, looking for any sign of where Jenny had gone. The forest floor was soft with years of fallen needles, but there weren't any clear footprints leading away from the tree. It was like she'd just vanished into thin air. "Jenny!" I called out, my voice echoing off the surrounding trees. "Jenny, Walsh, can you hear me?" Nothing but the whisper of wind through the branches. I knelt down to examine her belongings more closely. Everything was clean, no dirt or tears that would suggest a struggle. Her boots still had the laces tied. Who takes off their boots in the middle of a hike? And why fold your jacket so carefully if you're in trouble? I pulled out my radio and tried to call the station, but all I got was static. The mountains could be tricky for radio signals, but I'd never had trouble in this area before. That's when I heard it, a faint sound coming from somewhere above me. At first I thought it might be wind, but then I realized it sounded like crying. I looked up at the massive tree trunk, straining my ears. The sound was definitely coming from the tree itself, somewhere up in the branches where I couldn't see. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone up there?" The crying stopped immediately. I walked around to the other side of the tree, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were handprints pressed into the bark about 7 feet up the trunk. But they weren't normal handprints. They looked like they'd been pressed from the inside of the tree, as if someone had put their palms against the wood from within and pushed outward. That was impossible. Trees don't work that way. The bark doesn't bend like that. I stood on my tiptoes and touched one of the prints. The wood felt warm under my fingers, almost like skin, and soft, too soft for tree bark. "Help me." I jumped back from the tree. The voice had been so quiet I almost missed it, but it was definitely there. A woman's voice, muffled but clear. "Jenny? Jenny, is that you?" I pressed my ear against the trunk. "Help me, please. I can't get out." My heart started pounding. The voice was coming from inside the tree. That wasn't possible, but I was hearing it with my own ears. "Where are you? I can't see you." "Inside. I'm inside the tree. It won't let me out." I stepped back and really looked at the ancient spruce. The bark had deep grooves and patterns, but now that I was paying attention, some of those patterns looked almost like faces. Stretched, distorted faces with their mouths open in silent screams. No, that was crazy. Trees don't eat people. I was letting the isolation get to me, seeing things that weren't there. But then I heard another voice, deeper this time. A man. "Is someone out there? Please, I've been trapped for days." Then another voice, and another. Men and women, all calling for help from somewhere inside the massive tree trunk. I counted at least 5 different voices, all pleading to be rescued. I pulled out my camera and started taking pictures of everything. The handprints, Jenny's belongings, the tree itself. Whatever was happening here, I needed evidence. As I snapped photos, I noticed something else strange. The tree's bark near the base was lighter in color, almost fresh-looking, like new growth. But this tree had to be hundreds of years old. Ancient spruces didn't just suddenly start growing new bark. "Angie," I froze. One of the voices from inside the tree had said my name. "Angie Ravensong, I know you. You tried to save me." The voice was familiar, and suddenly I remembered. David Kimura, a climber who'd fallen from Eagle's Nest Cliff 3 years ago. I'd found him at the bottom, both legs broken, bleeding internally. I'd done everything I could, CPR, pressure on the wounds, called for helicopter evacuation, but he died in my arms before help arrived. "David," I whispered, "you remember. You tried so hard. But I died anyway, didn't I? This couldn't be happening." David was dead. I'd been at his funeral. I'd cried when his wife thanked me for trying to save him. "You're not real," I said out loud. "David is dead. We're all dead, Angie. But we're still here. And now, there are more of us." The bark of the tree began to shift and ripple, like water. The face-like patterns became clearer, more defined. I could see eyes, noses, mouths, all trapped just beneath the surface of the wood. I ran. I made it about a quarter mile before I had to stop and catch my breath. My nursing training kicked in. When you're panicking, focus on breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Count to 5 on each breath. But even as my heart rate slowed down, I couldn't shake what I'd seen and heard. Those voices had been real. I knew David's voice, and that had definitely been him speaking from inside the tree. I tried my radio again, still nothing but static. I needed to get back to the ranger station and call for backup. Whatever was happening in that grove, it was way beyond what one person could handle. But I also couldn't just leave if there was any chance those people were really trapped and still alive. As I hiked back toward the parking area, I started thinking about the Dena'ina stories my grandmother used to tell. Tree walkers that collected souls, trees that were hungry. I'd always figured they were just myths. But what if they were based on something real? The trail seemed longer, going back, and the shadows were getting deeper. It would be dark soon, and I didn't want to be in these woods after sunset. I was almost to the parking area when I saw him, another hiker coming up the trail toward me. A young guy in his 20s with a heavy pack and expensive hiking boots. "Hey there," he called out. "I'm looking for the old-growth grove. I heard there are some really ancient trees back there." "Don't go that way," I said quickly. "The trail's closed for maintenance." He frowned. There wasn't any notice at the trailhead. I drove 3 hours to see those trees. I should have made him leave. I should have escorted him back to his car and made sure he drove away. But he seemed so normal, so alive, and I was starting to doubt my own sanity. Maybe I'd imagined everything. "Just be careful," I told him. "And don't go off the marked trail." He nodded and kept hiking. I watched him disappear into the trees and felt a sick knot form in my stomach. 20 minutes later, I heard the screaming. It came from deep in the forest, echoing off the mountains. A man's voice, high and terrified, screaming for help. Then it cut off suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. I ran back up the trail, my medical kit bouncing against my hip. The screaming had come from the direction of the old spruce grove. I found his backpack first, sitting neatly at the base of a different ancient tree, about 50 yards from where I'd found Jenny's belongings. This spruce was almost as large as the first one, and just like before, the hiker's gear was arranged carefully around the base. His boots, his jacket, his water bottle, everything except the man himself. "Hello?" I called out. "Are you okay?" I heard screaming. Silence for a moment, then a familiar voice from inside the tree trunk. "Angie? Is that?" It was the same man I'd just met on the trail. "Mark," he'd said. His name was Mark Stevens. "Mark, where are you?" I don't know how to explain this. I'm inside the tree. It pulled me in somehow." I pressed my ear against the bark. His voice was muffled but clear. "That's impossible, Mark. Trees don't pull people inside them." I know how it sounds, but I was just looking at the tree, taking some pictures, and these branches came down and grabbed me. They pulled me right into the trunk. I can't move. I can't see anything. Please get me out of here. I examined the bark closely. Just like the first tree, there were handprint impressions pressed into the wood from the inside. Fresh ones. "Mark, I'm going to get help, okay? I'll be right back. Don't leave me here. Please." But I was already backing away from the tree. This was beyond anything I could handle alone. I needed to get to a phone and call for. What? The police? The fire department? How do you explain that trees are eating people? As I turned to leave, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. There were more ancient spruces in this grove than I'd realized. At least a dozen of them, scattered through the forest. And now that I was really looking, I could see that several of them had belongings scattered around their bases. Hiking boots, backpacks, clothes. How long had this been going on? How many people had disappeared in these woods? I started jogging toward the trailhead, but the trees seemed to shift and move in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly at them, they were perfectly still, but I could swear they were repositioning themselves. The path that had been clear an hour ago was now blocked by low-hanging branches. It took me twice as long to get back to my truck, and by the time I reached the parking area, it was getting dark. I tried starting the engine, but nothing happened. The battery was dead, even though it had been fine. That morning, I popped the hood and checked the connections. Everything looked normal, but the battery was completely drained, like something had been feeding off it. That's when I heard the voices again, carried on the wind from deep in the forest. Dozens of them now, all calling my name. "Angie, Angie, come back. We need you. Help us, Angie." I grabbed my flashlight and started walking toward the road. It was 5 miles to the nearest house, but I could make it by midnight if I kept moving. Behind me, the voices from the forest grew louder. I made it about 2 miles down the road before I saw headlights coming toward me. A Park Service truck, Tom's truck. He wasn't supposed to arrive until tomorrow morning, but I'd never been happier to see anyone in my life. "Angie." Tom pulled over and rolled down his window. "What are you doing out here? I got worried when I couldn't reach you on the radio." Tom Birch had been my partner for 3 years. He was steady, practical, and one of the best trackers in Alaska. If anyone could help me figure out what was happening in that forest, it was him. "Tom, thank God you're here. We have a serious problem. People are disappearing in the old-growth grove, and it's not normal disappearances. Something is. I paused, realizing how crazy this was going to sound. Something is wrong with the trees. Tom frowned. What do you mean, wrong with the trees? I climbed into the passenger seat and told him everything. Jenny's belongings, the voices from inside the tree trunks, Mark Stevens being absorbed right in front of me. Tom listened without interrupting, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. Angie, you've been alone in the woods all day. Sometimes isolation can play tricks on your mind. Are you sure you didn't just hear echo effects? Maybe some hikers calling from further away? I know how it sounds, but I'm not imagining this. We need to call for backup and cordon off that entire area. Tom was quiet for a moment. Tell you what, let's go take a look together. If there's really something dangerous out there, we need to know what we're dealing with before we call in a full response team. I didn't want to go back to those trees, especially in the dark. But Tom was right. We needed more information before we could file a credible report. We drove back to the trailhead and hiked in using our flashlights. Tom had brought his rifle, which made me feel slightly better. The forest was eerily quiet. No night sounds, no owls or rustling animals, just our footsteps on the muddy trail. There, I said, pointing my flashlight beam at the first massive spruce. That's where I found Jenny's gear. Tom walked around the tree, examining the belongings that were still scattered at its base. This is definitely strange placement. But people do weird things when they're having mental health crises. Maybe she was suicidal and... Listen, I interrupted. The voices were starting again. Faint at first, but growing stronger. Help us, please help us, we're trapped. Tom's flashlight beam wavered. What the hell? It's coming from inside the tree, I whispered. We both pressed our ears against the bark. The voices were unmistakable now. Multiple people, men and women, all pleading for rescue from somewhere inside the massive trunk. Tom Birch, is that you? One of the voices was addressing Tom directly. His face went pale in the flashlight beam. That's my Uncle Carl. But he's been dead for 10 years. The forest remembers everyone who died here, said Carl's voice from within the tree. And now it wants the living too. The bark began to shift and ripple under our hands. I could feel it growing warmer, softer, more like flesh than wood. The handprint impressions became more pronounced, as if people trapped inside were pressing desperately against the inner surface. We need to leave now. I grabbed Tom's arm. But as we turned to go, branches began descending from the trees around us, not falling, moving purposefully, like arms reaching down. The ancient spruces throughout the grove were coming alive, their massive limbs creaking and groaning as they bent toward us. Run, Tom shouted. We sprinted toward the trail, but the trees moved faster than seemed possible. Branches whipped at our faces, roots erupted from the ground to trip us, and I could swear the trunks themselves were shifting to block our path. A thick branch wrapped around my ankle and yanked me off my feet. I hit the ground hard, knocking the wind out of my lungs. As I gasped for air, I felt the forest floor beneath me becoming soft and spongy, like it was trying to absorb me. Tom turned back and grabbed my hands, pulling against the branch that held me. Hold on. But more branches were descending, and I could see the bark of the nearest tree opening like a mouth. The wood stretched and gaped, revealing a hollow space inside the trunk that pulsed with a sick, organic light. It wants us alive, I realized. It doesn't just kill people, it keeps them. Tom raised his rifle and fired 3 shots into the tree trunk. The bullets disappeared into the wood without leaving any visible damage, but the tree recoiled with what sounded like a scream of pain. The branch around my ankle loosened, and I scrambled to my feet. We ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, crashing through underbrush and leaping over fallen logs. Behind us, the entire forest seemed to be moving, pursuing us with the slow but relentless determination of something that had all the time in the world. We didn't stop running until we reached Tom's truck. What the hell was that? Tom gasped, leaning against the hood. I think it's all one organism, I said, pieces clicking together in my mind. All those ancient trees are connected underground by their root systems. They share consciousness. And they've been feeding on people for God knows how long. Tom stared back at the dark forest. The absorbed people, they're still conscious? From what I could tell, yes. Trapped, but aware. It's keeping them alive somehow, preserving their minds within the collective. We have to do something. We can't just leave them there. I thought about my nursing training, about the medical supplies I always carried. Maybe there is something we can do. But it's dangerous, and I don't think we both survive it. Tom looked at me steadily. What do you need? What I needed was something that could kill an organism from the inside. Something that would work on living tissue, but that I could deliver through the tree's absorption process. In my medical kit, I had morphine. Enough morphine to kill a person if injected directly. The organism keeps its victims alive to preserve their consciousness, I explained to Tom as we prepared. But if I can get absorbed while carrying a lethal dose of morphine and inject it into the organism from within. That's suicide, Angie. Maybe, but it's the only way to free everyone trapped in there. And if we don't stop this thing, it's going to keep taking people. Tom was quiet for a long moment. There has to be another way. You saw what happened when you shot it. Conventional weapons don't work. This thing has been growing for centuries, maybe longer. It's too big, too distributed to attack from the outside. In the end, Tom insisted on creating a distraction while I approached the main tree with the morphine. The plan was for him to draw the organism's attention to one side of the grove while I let myself be absorbed on the other side. It should have worked. But the organism was smarter than we'd given it credit for. As soon as we entered the forest, it split its attention. Half the trees focused on Tom, while the other half came for me. I watched in horror as Tom was pulled into one of the ancient spruces before I could even reach the main trunk. The tree's bark opened like a wound, and Tom disappeared inside with barely a chance to scream. Tom. I ran toward the tree that had taken him, but branches from other spruces blocked my path. Angie, listen to me. Tom's voice came from within the tree, already sounding distant and hollow. Finish this. Don't let us die for nothing. I prepared the morphine injection and walked toward the largest spruce tree, the one containing Jenny and David and all the others. The organism didn't fight me now. It wanted me to come closer. The bark opened invitingly, revealing the pulsing organic cavity within. I stepped inside. The sensation of being absorbed was unlike anything I could have imagined. The wood closed around me like water, but I could still breathe somehow. I was suspended in a warm, humid space that felt more like the inside of a living creature than a tree. And I wasn't alone. I could sense all of them, every person the organism had absorbed over the decades. Their consciousness pressed against mine, a desperate chorus of trapped minds. Jenny was there, and Mark, and Tom, David Kimura, dozens of others. But I could also feel the organism's consciousness. Vast, ancient, patient. It had been growing here since before humans came to this land, slowly expanding its network of connected trees. It didn't see us as people, just as sources of the consciousness it craved. I felt the morphine syringe still clutched in my hand. The organism hadn't recognized it as a threat. Fighting against the mental pressure of all those trapped minds, I found what felt like a main artery in the organic tissue around me and plunged the needle in deep. The organism's scream shook the entire forest. As the morphine spread through its system, I felt its consciousness begin to fragment and fade. The collective mind that had held all the absorbed people began to collapse. And then there was darkness. I woke up outside the grove 3 days later, found by a search and rescue team that Tom had called for as backup. The ancient spruces were dead, gray, hollow husks that crumbled at a touch, and scattered around their bases were bodies. All the people the organism had absorbed over the years, finally released but long past saving. I identified Jenny Walsh and Mark Stevens, and 17 others. We found Tom's body near the tree that had taken him, peaceful looking, like he'd simply laid down to sleep. The official report blamed a gas leak from underground deposits, some kind of hallucinogenic compound that had affected the local ecosystem and caused mass wildlife death. The area was fenced off and replanted with non-native species. I quit the Park Service and went back to nursing. I couldn't save the people in those trees, but maybe I could save someone else, somewhere else. But sometimes, when I'm walking past a wooded area, or even just a large tree in a park, I swear I can hear Tom's voice calling my name from somewhere inside the bark. And I wonder if I really killed the organism, or if I just damaged one part of something much larger. The Dena'ina had stories about tree walkers for a reason. And Alaska has a lot of old trees. A lot of old trees. My name is Rebecca Wolfsbane, but everyone calls me Becky. I've been a park ranger here in Chugach National Forest for 9 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Bears, avalanches, lost hikers, drunk campers, you name it. But nothing prepared me for what happened in September of 1981. I was 29 then, raising my 6-year-old daughter Emma all by myself after her father turned out to be the kind of man who thought his fists could solve problems. Brad was supposed to stay away from us. That's what the restraining order said. But pieces of paper don't stop angry ex-husbands. That's why I kept my grandfather's old .38 revolver in my pack, even though carrying personal weapons wasn't allowed. Some rules matter less than keeping your kids safe. The call came in on a Tuesday morning while Emma was getting ready for school. A family hadn't checked out from their campsite on time, and their car was still parked at the trailhead. The Pattersons, David, Susan, and their 7-year-old twins Billy and Sally. They'd been camping in the lower valley, about 8 miles into the forest, where the old-growth pines grow thick enough to block out the sky. Probably just lost track of time, my supervisor Tom said over the radio. But with winter coming early this year, better safe than sorry. He was right about winter coming early. The first snow had already dusted the peaks, and the weather service was calling for a possible blizzard by evening. The temperature was dropping fast, and families with kids don't usually handle unexpected cold well. I kissed Emma goodbye and promised to call her babysitter Mrs. Chen every few hours. Emma hugged my leg tight, the way she always did when I had to go into the deep forest. "Be careful, Mama," she said in that serious way kids have when they sense something's wrong but can't name it. "Always am, sweetheart." The drive to the Pattersons' campsite took 45 minutes on winding mountain roads. As I got deeper into the forest, I noticed something odd. Usually these woods are full of life, squirrels chattering, ravens calling, the distant drumming of woodpeckers. But today, silence pressed against my truck windows like something alive. Even stranger, I kept passing animals heading the wrong way. A black bear trotted down the road toward the highway, not bothering to move for my truck. A family of deer bounded past, their white tails flashing as they fled deeper into the valley. In 9 years of ranger work, I'd never seen wildlife abandon good territory like this. The radio crackled as I parked at the campsite. Mrs. Chen's voice came through clearly. "Emma's fine, dear, having lunch now." But underneath her words, I heard something else. A low sound, almost like static, but with a rhythm to it. Like breathing. "Thanks, Mrs. Chen. I'll check in again in a few hours." The Pattersons' campsite sat in a small clearing surrounded by towering pine trees. Their blue dome tent was still standing, but something about it looked wrong. The camp chairs were arranged in a perfect circle around a cold fire pit, like someone had been having a very formal meeting. A pot of what must have been yesterday's stew sat on the picnic table, completely untouched by scavengers. In 9 years, I'd never seen food sit out overnight without attracting every raccoon and squirrel for miles. I called out, "Hello, Park Service, anyone here?" The silence that answered felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Even my own voice seemed muffled by the trees. That's when I noticed the first set of tracks. The tracks circled the entire campsite in a perfect ring, about 20 feet out from the tent. At first glance, they looked like wolf prints, 4 toes, claw marks, about the right size. But wolves don't walk in perfect circles. And they definitely don't have what looked like thumb marks on the sides of their paws. I knelt down next to the clearest print, pulling out my measuring tape. 6 inches long, 4 inches wide. Way too big for any wolf I'd ever seen. And there was something else wrong with them. The depth. Whatever made these tracks was heavy, maybe 200 pounds or more. "Hello." I called again, louder this time. "Patterson family, this is Ranger Wolfsbane." A sound drifted back through the trees, faint but unmistakably human. A child calling, "Help us, please help us." My heart jumped. I grabbed my radio and emergency kit from the truck, checking that my grandfather's revolver was still secured in the side pocket. The voice had come from the north, deeper into the forest, where the trail led to an old Tlingit sacred grove. As I followed the path, The tracks became more obvious. Not just one animal, but a whole pack. They moved in single file, like soldiers. The lead animal's tracks were the biggest, with the others trailing behind in order of size. 7 sets total. The voice called again, "Mama, help us." I broke into a run, crashing through undergrowth as the trail twisted between massive pine trunks. The temperature was dropping fast, and my breath came out in white puffs. If the Patterson kids were lost out here in the cold, I found the first body about a quarter-mile from camp. David Patterson lay twisted against the base of a pine tree, his camping clothes shredded. At first, I thought it was a bear attack. The wounds looked like massive claw marks across his chest and throat. But bears don't arrange their victims. Someone had crossed David's arms over his chest and closed his eyes. My hands shook as I checked for a pulse I knew wouldn't be there. The body was still warm. "Oh God," I whispered, reaching for my radio. "Base, this is Becky. I need immediate backup and a medical team at the Patterson campsite. We have a fatality." Static answered me. Then, underneath the white noise, I heard something that made my blood freeze. "Becky." It was Brad's voice, slurred with alcohol. "Becky, you can't hide that little girl from me forever." I clicked off and tried again. "Base, do you copy?" "She's mine too, you know," Brad's voice continued through the static. "Emma belongs with her daddy." That was impossible. Brad didn't have access to Park Service frequencies. I was about to try a different channel when another voice cut through, a child's voice, high and frightened. "Mommy, the dogs took Billy. The dogs want to keep us." That was Sally Patterson. She was alive. I followed her voice deeper into the forest, past the trail markers, into territory I'd only been through a few times. The trees grew thicker here, blocking out most of the gray afternoon light. My flashlight beam seemed weak against the gathering darkness. The tracks were easier to follow now. The pack had been dragging something, or someone, and the trail was clear in the soft earth. Every few hundred feet, I found torn pieces of clothing. A small sneaker, a Disney princess backpack with bite marks through the fabric. "Sally," I called, "this is Ranger Becky. Can you hear me?" "Here. We're here." Her voice was coming from a thick stand of trees ahead, where the forest floor dropped into a shallow depression. As I got closer, I could see someone moving between the trunks. Sally Patterson crouched behind a fallen log, her blonde hair tangled with pine needles and dirt. She was shivering in just a torn t-shirt and jeans, but she was alive. When she saw me, she started crying. "The dogs took Billy," she sobbed as I wrapped her in my emergency blanket. "They look like people, but they're dogs. They said they want to adopt us." Kids sometimes see things differently when they're scared and traumatized. I'd seen it before with lost children. Their minds would create stories to make sense of scary situations. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Where's your brother?" Sally pointed deeper into the depression. "They took him to their house. They said we could be their kids now, but Billy liked them better. He went with them." As she spoke, I heard something that made the hair on my neck stand up. Howling, but not quite right. It sounded almost like a child crying, but deeper. Longer. And there was something that sounded like words mixed in with the animal sounds. "Come home. Children. Come home." Sally whimpered and pressed closer to me. "That's them. They want us to come home with them." I lifted her up and started backing toward the trail. Whatever was out there, it could wait for backup. My job was to get this little girl to safety. But as we reached the edge of the clearing, I saw them. 7 shapes moving between the trees, tall as men, but wrong somehow. They walked upright, but moved like animals, their heads held low, and their arms hanging too long at their sides. Even in the dim light, I could see they were, covered in dark fur. And they were following us. "Don't run," Sally whispered against my ear. "They chase runners. Just walk slow. Smart kid." I kept my pace steady as we made our way back toward the trail, but my hand found the grip of my revolver. 7 shots. 7 creatures. If I was a perfect shot, and if regular bullets could stop them, behind us, I could hear them moving through the undergrowth, not trying to hide anymore. Branches snapped under heavy feet, and that awful howling started up again, but closer now. "Billy, come back. Sally, we miss you." The voice sounded like a child, but no child had a throat that deep. No child's voice could carry that far through the trees. They talk? Sally said matter-of-factly. The big one knows lots of words. He said his name was Running Bear and that he was lonely. My radio crackled again. This time it was Mrs. Chen's panicked voice. Becky, Becky, are you there? Emma's gone. She was playing in the yard. And now I can't find her. My heart stopped. What do you mean, gone? I only looked away for a minute. I've searched everywhere. There are tracks in the mud by the fence. They look like big dog prints. The creatures behind us started making excited yipping sounds, like dogs hearing their owner come home. New sister. One of them called in that horrible child voice. Bring new sister home. I ran. Sally bounced in my arms as I crashed through the forest, but she didn't complain. Behind us, the pack gave chase, and now they weren't being quiet about it. I could hear them crashing through the trees, moving faster than anything that size should be able to. My truck was still a half-mile away when they got ahead of us. I stopped dead when I saw the first one standing on the trail. It was massive, maybe 7 feet tall, covered in dark gray fur. It stood like a man, but its face was all wrong, elongated like a wolf's, but with human eyes. Intelligent eyes. Ranger Becky, it said in a voice like gravel mixed with honey. We know about you. We know about Emma. How do you know my daughter's name? It smiled, showing teeth too big for even a wolf's mouth. We have her now. She's with our family. You can see her if you come home with us. Sally started crying again. That's Running Bear. He's the daddy of the pack. Where's Billy? I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Billy is becoming one of us. Running Bear said. He's learning to be a good pack son. Sally will learn too. And little Emma is already playing with her new brothers and sisters. Behind me, I could hear the rest of the pack moving closer. 6 more sets of heavy footsteps, 6 more breathing mouths with too many teeth. Children shouldn't be alone, Running Bear continued. Human parents die or leave or hurt their babies. We never leave, we never die, we protect our children forever. My radio crackled with Brad's voice again. Found your truck, Becky. Found your little girl too. Time for Emma to come home with Daddy. But that was impossible. Brad was somewhere else, and these things had Emma. Unless, children need better parents, Running Bear said, taking a step closer. We can smell the fear on you. We can smell the sadness, the anger at the man who hurt you. We can make all that go away. Where's Billy? I asked again. Running Bear tilted his massive head toward the forest. Learning to hunt. Learning to be strong. Soon he won't remember being weak and human. That's when I heard it, a child's laughter coming from the trees, but too wild, too animal-like. Billy Patterson was out there somewhere, and whatever these things were doing to him was changing him. Let me see Emma, I said. Let me see that she's okay, and I'll listen to what you have to say. Running Bear's ears perked up like a dog hearing a treat bag. Yes, come home with us. See your new family, better family. He turned and started walking deeper into the forest. The pack behind me moved closer, not quite touching, but making it clear I didn't have a choice about following. As we walked, Sally whispered in my ear. They're not mean, Ranger Becky. They just want kids to love. But they make you forget your real family after a while. How do you know that? Billy told me. He said, it feels nice to forget about being scared all the time. The trail led to a place I'd never seen before, though I thought I knew every square mile of this forest. We climbed down into a deep ravine where the trees grew so thick they formed a canopy overhead. At the bottom, tucked against a rock wall, was what looked like a cave entrance. But as we got closer, I could see it wasn't natural. Someone had built this place. The entrance was framed with carved wooden posts covered in symbols I didn't recognize. Antlers and bones hung from the trees around it like decorations. Home, Running Bear announced, proudly. From inside the cave, I could hear children's voices, playing, laughing, talking. But there was something wrong with the sound. Too many voices for just Billy and Emma, and some of them sounded like they'd been echoing in there for a very long time. How many children do you have? I asked. Running Bear's chest swelled with pride. Many children, good children, safe children, children who never grow old, never get sick, never leave home. He led us into the cave. The cave was bigger inside than it looked, stretching back into darkness beyond my flashlight beam. But the first chamber was lit by a fire in the center, and I could see everything I needed to see, Children, dozens of them. Some looked normal, human, playing with toys and games around the fire. Others were changing. They had too much hair, or their eyes reflected light like an animal's, or their teeth were too sharp. A few looked more like the pack members than like kids, still small, but covered in fur and walking on hands and feet. And in the middle of them all sat Emma. "Mama!" She ran to me, and for a second everything was normal. She felt warm and solid and human in my arms. But when she pulled back to look at me, her brown eyes had flecks of gold in them that hadn't been there before. "Mama, this is my new family," she said happily. "They're teaching me to be strong. Want to see?" Before I could answer, she opened her mouth and howled. It was definitely Emma's voice, but the sound that came out was pure wolf. "Good girl," Running Bear said, patting Emma's head with a massive clawed hand. "Very good." "Where's Billy?" I asked, though I was starting to be afraid of the answer. A boy came trotting over on all fours. At first glance, he looked like one of the more changed children, covered in brown fur with a wolf's snout instead of a human nose. But when he looked up at me, I recognized Billy Patterson's blue eyes. "Hi," he said, his voice muffled by his new mouth. "Sally, you came home." Sally started crying and tried to hide behind me. "It doesn't hurt," Billy told her. "Being this way is better. I'm not scared anymore. I'm not cold. And I'm part of a family that will never leave me." I looked around the cave at all the children, some human, some becoming something else, some already transformed. On the walls, I could see toys and clothes and photographs that looked decades old. How long had this been going on? "We've been collecting lost children for a very long time," Running Bear said, reading my expression. "Children who were abandoned, hurt, forgotten. We give them what they needed, a family that lasts forever. These children have families that are looking for them, families that lost them, families that hurt them, families that failed to protect them." Running Bear's voice grew sad. "Like yours failed to protect Emma from the angry man. That hit too close to home. Brad had been calling all day, threatening to take Emma. The restraining order was just paper. The courts might give him visitation rights. I couldn't protect her from everything, and we both knew it. But we can," Running Bear continued. "We can make her strong enough that no one will ever hurt her again. And you can stay with her. Be part of our family, be our pack mother." It was tempting. God help me, it was tempting. Emma looked happy here, happier than I'd seen her in months. She wasn't jumping at every sound, wasn't asking if Daddy was coming to hurt us again. But I looked at Billy, who couldn't even speak clearly anymore, and at the other children who barely looked human. What did you do to them? Made them better, made them ours. Running Bear stepped closer. "It's not scary, Ranger Becky. It feels good to let go of all the worry, all the fear, to know your children are safe forever." The pack had moved into the cave behind me. 7 massive wolf creatures, blocking the entrance. Emma was sitting with Billy now, and I could see her fingernails had grown longer, darker. Her teeth looked sharper when she smiled. "I want to think about it," I said, trying to buy time. "Of course, but Emma has already chosen. Look." Emma was playing with a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child was completely covered in gray fur and walked like a wolf, but when she giggled, it sounded almost normal. "That was little Sarah Morrison," Running Bear said proudly. "She was lost in a blizzard 3 years ago. Her parents thought she died, but we found her. And now she's never cold, never hungry, never afraid." 3 years. This had been going on for at least 3 years, and nobody knew. How many children? 47 in our pack now. All safe, all loved, all ours. 47 missing children. 47 families that thought their kids were dead. My hand found my revolver again. 6 shots. I counted 7 adults, plus Emma and Billy and all those other kids who might try to stop me. "I can't let you keep doing this," I said. Running Bear's ears flattened against his head. "You would rather they die alone in the cold? Rather they grow up to be hurt and abandoned like you were? I'd rather they have a choice. Children cannot choose. That's why they need parents. Real parents who protect them. By kidnapping them? By saving them." His voice grew deeper, more growl than words. "You will understand when you are one of us. When your human worry is gone." The pack started moving closer. Emma looked up from her game, and I saw confusion in her golden-flecked eyes. "Mama? Are you going to be different too?" I pulled out my grandfather's revolver. "Emma, I need you to come with me right now, but I like it here." "I know, sweetheart, but we need to go home." Running Bear laughed, a sound like rocks rolling down a mountain. "This is home now. You cannot take our children from us. Watch me." I shot him center mass. The gunshot echoed through the cave like thunder. Running Bear staggered backward, looking down at the spreading red stain on his chest with something like surprise. Then he smiled. "Iron bullets," he said. "How traditional." The wound was already closing. The rest of the pack snarled and moved toward me, but Running Bear held up a hand. "Wait. Let her see that she cannot win this way." He was right. Regular bullets weren't going to stop them. But the shot had done something else. It had scared the children. The human ones were crying now, and even some of the transformed kids were whimpering. "Emma," I said, keeping my voice calm, "remember what I taught you about dangerous situations?" She nodded, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Sometimes we have to run, even when we don't want to. Can you do that for Mama?" Emma looked around at her new family, then back at me. For a moment, I wasn't sure which way she'd choose. But then she ran to me, and Sally grabbed my other hand. "Billy," I called. "Come on." The boy who used to be Billy Patterson looked at me with those sad blue eyes, then shook his head. "I want to stay. I like being strong." There wasn't time to argue. The pack was getting restless, and I could hear more howling from deeper in the cave system, more of them coming. I backed toward the entrance with the girls, keeping my gun trained on Running Bear. He didn't try to follow, just watched with those intelligent, patient eyes. "You cannot run forever, Ranger Becky. We will find Emma again. We will find Sally. Children belong with family, and we are the only family that will never abandon them." Outside, snow was starting to fall. The blizzard the weather service had predicted was moving in fast, and visibility was dropping. I had maybe an hour to get the girls to safety before we'd be trapped in the forest with that pack. "Can you run?" I asked Emma. She nodded, but I could see she was already tired. The transformation, whatever they'd done to her, had taken a lot out of her. We made it halfway back to the truck before they caught up. I heard them first, crashing through the trees behind us, howling that awful mix of human and animal sounds. But this time, there were more voices than before. The whole pack, all 47 members, was coming after us. "Ranger Becky," Running Bear's voice carried through the wind. "You're hurting Emma by making her run. She belongs with us now. Her body knows it, her heart knows it." He was right. Emma was starting to change again. Her eyes were more gold than brown now, and she was moving on all fours more than upright. Whatever they'd done to her, taking her away from the pack was making it worse. "Fight it, baby," I whispered. "Remember who you are. Remember Mama loves you." "It hurts," she whimpered. "Mama, it hurts to be human." My heart broke, but I kept running. We reached the truck just as the first of them broke through the tree line. I shoved both girls into the cab and gunned the engine, spinning wheels on the icy ground as we tore down the mountain road. In the rearview mirror, I could see them following. Not running now, they knew they couldn't catch a truck, but following steadily, patiently, like they had all the time in the world. Because they did. The police didn't believe my story, of course. Animal attack, they said. Probably a bear that had gotten into the camp food and gone aggressive. The fact that we never found Susan Patterson's body just meant the bear had dragged it off somewhere. Billy Patterson was listed as missing, presumed dead. Search teams found no trace of him. The custody hearing was a nightmare. Brad's lawyer used the incident to argue that my job was too dangerous, that I was exposing Emma to unnecessary risks. The judge agreed. I transferred to a desk job in Anchorage and only got to see Emma on weekends. But at least I could keep an eye on her. The changes faded slowly. Her eyes went back to brown, her teeth returned to normal, and she stopped howling in her sleep. But sometimes, on the nights when Brad had her and I was alone in my apartment, I could hear something calling from the mountains. "Emma, come home. We miss you." And sometimes, if I'm honest, I was tempted to pack up the car and drive back to that forest. To that cave where my daughter had been happy, where she'd felt safe and loved and part of something larger than herself. But then I'd remember Billy Patterson's blue eyes looking out from a wolf's face, and I'd stay put. The missing children reports never stopped. Every few months, another family camping in Chugach Forest would lose a kid. The children were always found safe, usually claiming they'd been adopted by a nice family who lived in the woods. But the search teams never found any evidence of these mysterious families. I kept my grandfather's revolver, though I had the bullets melted down and recast with silver from my grandmother's jewelry box, just in case, because I know they're still out there, still collecting lost children, still building their eternal family, still waiting for Emma to come home. And deep down, in the part of my heart that remembers how happy she looked in that firelit cave, part of me is still waiting too. My name is Theodore Frostborn, but everyone calls me Teddy. After 31 years as a park ranger in Alaska, I thought I'd seen everything these wild lands could throw at me. Bears, avalanches, tourists who thought they were bear, grills, you name it, I'd handled it. At 59, with retirement just months away, I figured my biggest worry would be whether Martha would say yes when I finally worked up the courage to propose. I was wrong about a lot of things that summer. It was August 1963 when I got the call about Malaspina Glacier. The radio crackled to life in my cabin at dawn, jolting me from dreams of Martha's smile and the engagement ring hidden in my sock drawer. "Teddy, we need you out at the glacier," came the voice of my supervisor, Bill Crawford. "Got some eggheads from the university all worked up about seismic readings. They want a ranger escort for their research." I groaned and reached for my coffee pot. "What kind of readings?" "Movement under the ice. Big movement. They think it might be unstable." Malaspina Glacier sits in the heart of Wrangell Street, Elias, a massive sheet of ice bigger than Rhode Island. It's what we call a Piedmont glacier, flows down from the mountains and spreads out like spilled milk across the coastal plain. Most tourists never see it because it's a hell of a trek to get there, which suited me fine. The fewer people trampling around on unstable ice, the better. "How many researchers?" I asked, already knowing I'd take the job. 31 years of saying yes to whatever the Park Service needed had become a habit I couldn't break. 4 glaciologists from the University of Alaska. They'll have their own equipment, just need someone who knows the terrain. I packed my gear with the practiced efficiency of 3 decades in the wilderness. Radio equipment that weighed more than a small child, climbing gear, emergency rations, and my grandfather's compass. The one thing that had never failed me in all my years ranging these mountains. On impulse, I grabbed the engagement ring from my sock drawer and slipped it into my shirt pocket. Maybe when I got back, I'd finally ask Martha to spend our golden years together. The helicopter ride to Malaspina took 2 hours through some of the most beautiful country God ever made. Snow-capped peaks stretched to the horizon, and rivers carved silver ribbons through valleys so deep they seemed to touch the earth's core. As we approached the glacier, though, something felt different. The ice looked wrong. In all my years, I'd never seen glacier ice with that strange blue-black color, like it was bruised. And there were cracks everywhere, not the normal crevasses you'd expect, but jagged lines that seemed to form patterns, almost like something was trying to write messages in the ice. We landed at a temporary research camp set up on the glacier's edge. 4 people emerged from heavy-duty tents, bundled in Arctic gear, despite the unusually warm weather. Dr. James River was the team leader, a thin man with nervous eyes who kept checking his seismic equipment every few minutes. "Ranger Frostborn, thank God you're here. We've been recording the strangest readings." His team consisted of Dr. Sarah Mountain, a tough-looking woman in her 40s who studied ice formations. Dr. Michael Tundra, a young geologist excited about everything, and Dr. Lisa Snowpeak, their electronics specialist who managed the fancy monitoring equipment I didn't pretend to understand. "What exactly are you seeing?" I asked, setting down my pack near their equipment station. Dr. River pulled out a chart covered in wavy lines. "These are seismic readings from the past week. See these patterns?" He pointed to regular spikes on the graph. "This isn't geological activity. It's too rhythmic, too consistent." I studied the chart. The pattern did look strange, like a heartbeat or breathing. Could be water movement under the ice. That's what we thought initially, Dr. Mountain said, joining us. But the movement is too large, too coordinated. Whatever's causing this is massive, Doctor. Tundra bounced over, practically vibrating with excitement. Ranger Frostborn, we think we might have discovered a new type of geological phenomenon. The ice core samples we've taken show organic matter that's been preserved for thousands of years, but the cellular structure suggests it was alive much more recently than it should be. That night, as we set up camp, I radioed back to headquarters. Base, this is Teddy. Team is established at Malaspina. Everything normal so far. But it wasn't normal. As darkness fell, I could hear something from deep within the glacier, a low rumbling that made my teeth ache. The sound was too regular to be natural ice movement, too deep to be wind. It sounded like something breathing in its sleep. I thought about the Ayak stories my grandfather used to tell, about Yeti, the ice giant that slept beneath the glaciers, shaping the land with its dreams. As a ranger, I'd always been a practical man, dealing in facts and evidence. But that night, lying in my sleeping bag with that rhythmic rumbling echoing through the ice below me, I started to wonder if some stories might be more than just stories. The first sign of real trouble came at dawn. I woke to Dr. River, shaking my shoulder, his face pale despite the cold. Ranger, you need to see this. Outside our tents, the glacier had changed overnight. Where there had been solid ice the evening before, a crevasse now split the surface, not a crack, but a deliberate-looking opening that ran in a perfectly straight line for over 100 yards. This wasn't here yesterday, Doctor, Mountain said, standing at the edge with her ice axe. I surveyed this entire area. The ice was solid. I knelt beside the crack and peered down. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and they descended into darkness deeper than my flashlight could penetrate. But the strangest thing was the smell rising from the depths, organic, like something alive but ancient. Could be pressure release, I said, though I didn't believe it myself. Sometimes glaciers shift and a sound cut me off, deep, resonant, coming from inside the crevasse. It lasted about 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. Dr. Tundra laughed nervously. Ice settling. Has to be. But Dr. Snowpeak was checking her equipment, frowning at the displays. The electromagnetic readings just spiked. Whatever made that sound generated a massive electrical field. We spent the morning taking measurements and photographs. The crevasse was roughly 6 feet wide and appeared to run straight down through the entire depth of the glacier, over 400 feet of ice. Dr. River lowered a camera on a cable, but the images came back distorted, as if something was interfering with the electronics. Around noon, Dr. Tundra made the discovery that changed everything. He'd been chipping ice samples from the crevasse walls when his axe hit something that wasn't ice. We all gathered around as he carefully cleared away the frozen material to reveal what looked like skin, blue-black and tough as leather, but unmistakably organic. My God, Doctor, Mountain whispered, it's preserved tissue. But the size. The patch of skin was easily 3 feet across, and it curved away into the ice as if it belonged to something enormous. When Dr. Snowpeak pressed her scanner against it, the device went crazy, beeping and flashing like it couldn't process what it was reading. The cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen, she said, staring at her display. It's definitely organic, but the scale, if this tissue pattern is consistent, whatever this belongs to would have to be. She trailed off, doing calculations in her head. How big? I asked. Over 200 feet tall. We all stood there in silence, looking at that patch of ancient skin. 200 feet. That was taller than most buildings, bigger than any known life form that had ever existed. It has to be some kind of prehistoric whale. Doctor, River said finally, preserved in the ice when the glacier formed. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe it. Whales didn't have skin like this, and they certainly didn't generate electromagnetic fields. That afternoon, things got worse. Dr. Tundra volunteered to rappel down into the crevasse to get better samples. We rigged a safety line and lowered him slowly, his voice coming through the radio as he descended. 20 feet down, 30. The walls are definitely organic here. It's like the inside of some massive creature. Tundra, be careful down there, I called. Something about this felt wrong. In 31 years of wilderness work, I'd learned to trust my instincts, and every instinct I had was screaming danger. 50 feet. 60. Wait, there's something here. A cavity in the wall, like a pocket, or, oh, Jesus. His voice cut off. Tundra, Dr. River shouted into the radio. Respond. Silence. We pulled on the safety line, but it came up slack. The rope had been cut, not frayed or broken, but sliced clean through by something sharp. Michael, Dr. Mountain called down into the crevasse. Michael, can you hear us? For a moment, nothing. Then, from the depths, a scream that made my blood turn to ice. It was Dr. Tundra, but his voice was filled with terror like nothing I'd ever heard. Something's got me. Something's got me. It's pulling me deeper. Oh God, it's alive. It's alive. The screaming stopped abruptly. We waited by the crevasse for 3 hours, calling down, listening for any sound. Doctor. Snow Peak's equipment registered massive electromagnetic activity from deep within the ice, but no sign of Dr. Tundra. We have to go down after him, Dr. Mountain said. No. I made the hardest decision of my career. Nobody else goes down there. We're dealing with something we don't understand. That night, I radioed headquarters and requested immediate evacuation. But the response was garbled, full of static that hadn't been there before. Our communication was being jammed by something. As darkness fell, the rumbling from beneath the glacier grew louder. And for the first time, I could swear I heard something else in those deep sounds, something that sounded almost like a voice, speaking in a language older than human memory. Dr. River sat by his seismic equipment, staring at readings that made no scientific sense. It's moving, he whispered. Whatever's down there, it's moving, and it's getting closer to the surface. I lay in my sleeping bag that night, one hand on my radio and the other on Martha's engagement ring, wondering if I'd ever see her again. Outside, the glacier groaned and shifted, and I knew with cold certainty that we had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Something that was very, very angry about being disturbed. The second day brought horrors I still can't fully explain. I woke to find Dr. Mountain standing at the edge of our camp, staring at the glacier surface. During the night, more cracks had appeared. Not random breaks, but deliberate patterns that formed what looked like a massive handprint pressed into the ice. Each finger impression was 12 feet long. It's impossible, Dr. River muttered, taking photographs. Ice doesn't form patterns like this. Something would have to press down from above to create these impressions. But I was looking at the depth of the prints. Whatever made them had pushed down through 6 feet of solid ice like it was soft snow. The force required would be enormous. Doctor. Snow Peak's equipment was going haywire. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, she said, adjusting dials frantically. It's like there's a massive electrical storm right beneath us, but the energy signature is completely wrong. It's organic. Organic electricity? I asked. Living creatures generate electrical fields, our nervous systems, muscle contractions. But this is massive, like the neural activity of something the size of a building. That's when we heard Dr. Tundra. His voice came from deep within the glacier, carried up through the cracks in the ice. But it wasn't calling for help. It was screaming warnings. Don't wake it, don't wake it. It's been sleeping for so long. Go away. Dr. Mountain grabbed the radio. Michael, where are you? We're coming to get you. No. The voice was desperate, terrified. You can't. It has me. It's using me. It knows you're here. Then silence. Dr. River was studying his seismic readings, his face white. According to these instruments, that voice came from over 300 feet down, moving laterally through the glacier at impossible speeds. Nothing could survive at that depth, and certainly couldn't move that fast through solid ice. But I'd spent 3 decades in Alaska wilderness. I knew the difference between impossible and just bigger than we understood. Around midday, the glacier began to change. The ice started flowing in patterns that defied everything I knew about glacial movement. Sections would suddenly melt, creating channels and caves, then refreeze within minutes. It was like watching a time-lapse video of geological processes that should take centuries happening in real time. It's reshaping the glacier, Dr. Snow Peak said, watching her instruments. The thermal readings show massive heat sources moving beneath us, melting the ice and reforming it. That's when Dr. Mountain died. We were collecting ice samples from one of the newly formed channels when the ground beneath her simply opened up. Not a gradual collapse or a shifting crevasse. The ice parted like curtains, and she dropped into a cavity that hadn't existed seconds before. I dove forward and caught her hand just as she fell. For a moment, I thought I had her. Then I saw what was below. In the depths beneath the glacier, something massive was moving. I caught a glimpse of what looked like an enormous eye, blue-black and ancient, staring up at us with intelligence that was alien and terrible. The eye was the size of a car, and when it focused on me, I felt a presence touch my mind, cold, vast, and unimaginably old. Dr. Mountain screamed as something unseen grabbed her from below. Her grip on my hand tightened, then went slack as whatever had her pulled with force that nearly dragged me into the cavity. "Hold on," I shouted, but it was too late. She was torn from my grasp and vanished into the darkness below. The ice reformed instantly, sealing the opening as if it had never existed. Dr. River and Dr. Snow Peak stared at me in shock. "Where is she?" Dr. River demanded. "Where did she go?" I looked at the solid ice beneath my feet. No sign of the cavity that had opened up. No evidence that Dr. Mountain had ever been there, except for the ice axe lying abandoned on the surface. "Something's down there," I said. "Something alive, and it's big enough to reshape the entire glacier." That afternoon, as we huddled in our remaining tent, Dr. Snow Peak made a discovery that chilled me to the bone. She'd been analyzing the electromagnetic readings from the past 2 days, looking for patterns. "The electrical activity isn't random," she said, showing us her charts. "It's structured, like brainwaves. Complex brainwaves. Whatever's beneath us isn't just alive. It's thinking." Dr. River laughed, but there was hysteria in his voice. "You're suggesting there's a thinking creature the size of a mountain beneath this glacier?" "I'm not suggesting it," she replied grimly. "I'm stating it as fact." That night, the thing beneath the ice began to communicate. The basque rumbling we'd been hearing resolved into something that was almost language, deep, resonant sounds that seemed to bypass my ears and speak directly to my bones. I couldn't understand the words, but the emotion behind them was clear. Anger, confusion, and something that might have been sadness. Dr. River was recording everything, his scientific training warring with mounting terror. "It's trying to communicate. We've made contact with a previously unknown species." But I remembered my grandfather's stories about Yeti, the ice giant that slept beneath the glaciers. According to Ayak legend, the creature shaped the very landscape of Alaska, carving valleys and raising mountains as it moved through its eternal dreams. It was supposed to sleep forever, unless something disturbed its rest. Something like a geological survey team with seismic equipment, sending vibrations deep into the ice. As if responding to my thoughts, the glacier around us began to crack and shift. Ice, formations that had stood for centuries, started collapsing. The thing beneath was waking up, and its movements were remaking the entire landscape. "We have to leave," I said. "Now." But when we tried to reach our emergency radio, we found that our equipment had been destroyed. Not by accident, but deliberately torn apart and scattered across the ice. The creature beneath knew exactly what it was doing. We were trapped on an unstable glacier with something ancient and enormous stirring beneath us, cut off from all communication with the outside world. And I was beginning to understand that this was exactly what it wanted. The third night, the ice giant finally showed itself. I was on watch when the glacier began to glow. Not the normal blue luminescence of deep ice, but something warmer, like light from within a living body. Cracks spread across the surface in geometric patterns, and through the transparent ice, I could see movement on a scale that defied comprehension. Dr. River and Dr. Snow Peak emerged from the tent as the rumbling grew so intense it knocked us to our knees. The entire glacier was shifting, rising in some places, sinking in others, as something beneath rearranged itself after centuries of sleep. "My God, Dr. Snow Peak whispered, staring at her equipment. "The readings, it's standing up." Through the glowing ice, we could see the outline of something that had once been human but had grown far beyond human limitations. 200 feet tall, with proportions that suggested massive strength and intelligence that burned like cold fire in eyes the size of houses. The creature's skin was the blue-black of deep ice, but alive and breathing. When it moved, the entire glacier moved with it, as if the ice itself was part of its body. And when it looked at us through hundreds of feet of glacier ice, I felt that alien intelligence touch my mind again. This time, it spoke. The words didn't come through my ears, but directly into my thoughts. In a language that was older than human speech, but somehow familiar, as if it came from racial memories buried deep in our genes. Asterisk, why do you wake me from dreams of stone and ice? Asterisk, Dr. River was frantically taking readings, his scientific training keeping him functional despite the impossibility of what we were witnessing. It's communicating. We're in contact with a creature that predates human civilization. Asterisk, I have slept beneath the ice for 10,000 years. Asterisk, the voice continued in my mind. Asterisk, I shaped these mountains in my youth, carved these valleys with my footsteps. Why do you disturb my eternal rest? Asterisk, I found my voice somehow. We didn't know, we were just studying the glacier. The creature's laugh was like avalanches, like the sound of mountains being born. Asterisk, studying? You send vibrations into my flesh, wake me from dreams that have lasted since the Ice Age. Do you know what you have done? Asterisk. The glacier beneath us began to crack, apart. Ice, the size of buildings, broke away and tumbled into crevasses that opened like hungry mouths. We scrambled for stable ground as our world literally fell apart beneath our feet. That's when Dr. Snow Peak died. As we tried to reach higher ground, a section of ice collapsed beneath her. I saw her fall, saw her grab for the edge of a crevasse, and then watched in horror as something reached up from below. Not the ice giant, something else, something that might once have been Dr. Tundra, but was no longer entirely human. He pulled her down into the darkness, and her screams echoed from the depths until they stopped abruptly. Asterisk, those who enter my domain become part of my dreams. Asterisk, the giant explained, its mental voice almost gentle. Asterisk, they live forever in the ice, sharing my eternal sleep. It is not a cruel fate. Asterisk, Dr. River was backing away from the growing cracks, his equipment forgotten. This is impossible. Creatures this size can't exist. The square cube law, the combed energy requirements. Asterisk, your science is young. Asterisk, the creature replied, and somehow Dr. River heard it too, his eyes widening in terror. Asterisk, I am from a time when life was not constrained by your small understanding. I am the last of my kind, the final dreamer beneath the ice. Asterisk. The glacier began to tilt as the giant shifted position. Massive chunks of ice, some weighing thousands of tons, slid into the sea with splashes that sent tsunami waves racing toward the coast. I realized with growing horror what was happening. The creature wasn't just waking up, it was standing up, rising from a sleeping position it had maintained for millennia. And when something 200 feet tall and carrying the weight of an entire glacier stood up, the consequences would be felt across half of Alaska. Coastal communities would be wiped out by tsunamis. The earthquake from its movement would trigger avalanches and landslides across the mountain range. Thousands of people would die. You have to stop, I said aloud. People will be hurt, innocent people. The giant's attention focused on me with crushing intensity. Asterisk, people? Your kind was nothing but clever animals when I last walked the earth. You have multiplied like insects. Why should I care for insects? Asterisk, but I could sense something else in its mental voice. Not cruelty, but exhaustion and loneliness that had lasted for thousands of years. This creature had been the last of its kind since before human civilization began. Because we're not insects, I said. We're like you. We think, we dream, we love. We build things and create beauty. We're alive. The glacier stopped shifting. For a long moment, the only sound was ice settling and Dr. River's panicked breathing. Asterisk, A alive. Asterisk, the creature repeated. Asterisk, yes. I remember what that was like, before the long sleep. Show me. Asterisk, I pulled Martha's engagement ring from my pocket, holding it up so the ancient intelligence could see. This is for the woman I love. I was going to ask her to marry me when I got back from this job. She's waiting for me, worried about me, hoping I'll come home safe. The giant studied the ring, its massive eye visible through the ice just feet away from where I stood. Asterisk love. I remember love. My kind knew love before the ice claimed us all. Asterisk. Then you understand, I said. That woman, the people in the coastal towns, they're all somebody's love. Please don't hurt them. Dr. River chose that moment to run. He bolted across the unstable ice, perhaps thinking he could reach our emergency equipment cache. He made it about 50 yards before a crevasse opened directly beneath him, and he fell into the depths, his screams echoing until they were cut short. Asterisk, he was afraid. Asterisk, the giant observed. Asterisk, fear makes creatures small and selfish. But you stand here and speak of love while your world crumbles. You are interesting, little dreamer. Asterisk. My name is Teddy, I said. Teddy Frostborn. Asterisk, Teddy Frostborn. Asterisk, the gom. Creature seemed to taste the name. Asterisk, I am. I had a name once, in the language of stone and wind. But I have been asleep so long, I remember only purpose. I am the guardian beneath the ice. Then guard, I said desperately. Guard the people who live here now. Go back to sleep, please. The glacier was still unstable, chunks breaking away and sliding toward the sea. But the movement had slowed, as if the giant was considering my words. Asterisk, if I sleep again, will your kind disturb me? Will you send your vibrations into my flesh, wake me from dreams of ice and stone? Asterisk, I thought about the future, about oil exploration and mining and development that would inevitably come to Alaska, about seismic surveys and deep drilling, and all the ways humanity would probe into the earth. Not if I can prevent it, I said. I'll make sure you're left alone. Asterisk, one human cannot speak for all humans. Asterisk, no, I agreed. But I can stay here. I can be your guardian. I can make sure no one disturbs your sleep again. The glacier went silent except for the distant sound of ice settling. For a long moment, I thought the creature was ignoring me. Then, asterisk, you would give up your love? Your life among your kind? To guard my sleep? Asterisk, I looked at Martha's engagement ring, thought about the life we'd planned together, the cabin by the lake, the quiet retirement I'd dreamed of for years. Yes, I said, if it means saving the people I've sworn to protect. Asterisk, then we have an agreement, Teddy Frostborn. I will return to my dreams, and you will ensure I am not disturbed. But know this, if I am awakened again, I will not be so understanding. Asterisk. The glacier began to settle back into place, massive sections of ice flowing like water as they reformed around the creature's sleeping form. The glow beneath the ice faded as the ancient intelligence prepared to return to its eternal rest. Asterisk, sleep with me, guardian. Dream of ice and stone. Your life will be long, longer than your kind usually knows. The ice will preserve you as it has preserved me. Asterisk, I felt a cold that was different from normal cold, a deep chill that seemed to seep into my bones and change them at the molecular level. My reflection in the ice showed that my hair was already turning white, my skin taking on a pale, almost translucent quality. Asterisk, do not fear. Asterisk, the giant's voice was growing distant as it sank back into sleep. Asterisk, this is not death. This is becoming part of something larger than yourself. Asterisk. As consciousness faded, I had one last thought of Martha, waiting for me to come home with stories and plans for our future together. I hope she understood that some promises are bigger than personal happiness. I've been here for 62 years now. The official report listed me as missing, presumed dead in a glacier collapse. The research team's disappearance was attributed to unstable ice conditions, which wasn't entirely a lie. The glacier was declared off-limits to future research, citing dangerous seismic activity that could threaten anyone who ventured onto the ice. Martha waited for me for 7 years before she moved on with her life. I know because I sent the engagement ring back to her through a ranger who found me wandering delirious near the glacier's edge. He delivered my message that I was staying in Alaska for reasons I couldn't explain, and that she should forget about me and find happiness with someone who could give her the life she deserved. She married a teacher from Anchorage. They had 3 children and were happy together until she passed away in her sleep last spring. I felt her death like a cold wind across the glacier, a reminder of the mortal world I'd left behind. The ice preserves me, just as the giant promised. I look much as I did that day in 1963, perhaps a bit older, my hair white as new snow, and my skin translucent enough that veins show blue beneath the surface. I don't get hungry often, don't sleep much, don't feel heat or cold the way normal people do. But I dream the giant's dreams. In those dreams, I see Alaska as it was millions of years ago, when creatures like my companion shaped mountains with their footsteps and carved valleys with their breath. I see the ice ages come and go, watch as small mammals grow larger and more clever. Witness the first humans crossing the land bridge from Asia. I see the future too, in fractured images that may or may not come to pass. Cities rising along the coast, machines that drill deeper than anyone has drilled before, the slow warming of the world that makes the giant stir uneasily in its sleep. 3 times in the past 60 years, I've had to intervene. In 1978, an oil exploration team wanted to do seismic surveys on the glacier. I met them at their base camp, introduced myself as a local guide, and convinced them that the ice was too unstable for their equipment. They moved their survey 20 miles south. In 1994, a team of extreme sports enthusiasts wanted to set up a base jumping platform on the glacier's highest point. I cut their access ropes in the night and left them a note, explaining that the area was sacred to the local Ayak people and should not be disturbed. Last year, climate change researchers wanted to drill ice cores to study ancient atmospheric conditions. I had to be more direct with them. When they woke up, their equipment was scattered across the glacier in pieces too small to reassemble. They decided the site was cursed and found somewhere else to conduct their research. The giant sleeps peacefully most of the time, but sometimes it stirs when heavy aircraft fly overhead or when earthquakes register on seismic equipment hundreds of miles away. On those nights, I can feel its dreams shifting, ancient memories of waking mixing with present-day sensations. I'm the only thing standing between those dreams and a very real catastrophe. Other rangers have reported strange activity. At glaciers throughout Alaska, electromagnetic anomalies, unusual ice formations, sounds that don't match any known geological phenomena. I think my companion wasn't the only one of its kind, just the largest and the most deeply asleep. Climate change worries me more than anything else. As the world warms and glaciers retreat, some of these sleeping giants might wake naturally. When that happens, there won't be anyone there to negotiate with them, to convince them to go back to sleep. I've tried to leave warnings, scientific papers submitted under false names, reports filed with geological surveys that hint at the truth without revealing it directly. Most are dismissed as the work of cranks or environmental extremists. A few are classified by government agencies that understand the implications but don't know what to do about them. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, staying here instead of living my life with Martha. But then I feel the giant's contentment in sleep, sense the vast destructive power that rests quietly beneath the ice. And I know that some sacrifices are necessary. I'm not lonely, exactly. The giant's dreams are company enough, filled with memories of a world that was both more beautiful and more terrible than anything modern humans can imagine. And sometimes, late at night, when the aurora borealis dances across the sky, I think I can hear other guardians out there, keeping watch over their own sleeping giants. We're not many, but we're enough. For now, the world is changing faster than it ever has before. Ice is melting, continents are shifting, and deep beneath the earth, ancient things are beginning to stir. When they wake fully, humanity will need to decide what kind of species we want to be. One that coexists with powers beyond our understanding, or one that tries to conquer everything we encounter. I hope we choose wisely. But if we don't, if we wake too many of the sleepers beneath the ice, I'll be here to remind them that some humans understand the old ways, the old promises, the old agreements made between species, separated by eons, but united by the simple fact that we're all trying to survive on the same small planet. My name is Theodore Frostborn, and I am the guardian of Malaspina Glacier, and I will keep my promise until the ice melts and the mountains fall and the last giant finally wakes from its eternal dream. My name is Vincent Darkwater, but everyone calls me Vince. I've been a park ranger for 23 years, And I know the Brooks Range Mountains in Alaska better than any living person. That's not bragging, it's just fact. When other rangers get lost, they call me. When hunters go missing, they send me to find them. I've never lost anyone out here. Well, almost never. 3 years ago, my wife Sarah died in an avalanche. My fault. I'd been drinking the night before a climb, made a bad call about the snow conditions. When I heard her scream as the white wall came down, something inside me broke that never healed right. Now I carry her wedding ring in my pocket and talk to her photo every night. The whiskey helps me sleep, but it never stops the guilt. This was supposed to be my last mission. At 51, they were forcing me to retire next month. After that, I had plans to join Sarah, if you know what I mean. But first, I had to find Dr. Helena Cross and her archaeology team. They'd been up here for 2 weeks, studying old Inuit burial sites near Anaktuvuk Pass. The last radio contact came 3 days ago, and it was strange. Helena's voice sounded shaky when she reported unusual bone arrangements around their camp. Then the radio went dead. I started my search at first light, temperature at -70, with wind gusts hitting 120. Normal people would die in minutes out here, but I grew up in these mountains. My snowshoes crunched across the frozen wasteland as I followed their trail toward the ancient burial grounds. The archaeologists had picked a hell of a place to dig. The old Nunavut Inuit considered this area sacred, filled with spirits they called Tornrak, bone spirits that could rebuild themselves using human remains. Course, that was just legend, right? I found their camp around noon, tucked into a valley between 2 ridges, 4 tents still standing, equipment scattered but not by wind. The strangest thing was Helena's coffee pot, still warm on a portable stove. Steam was rising from the cup next to it, like someone had just walked away. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed off the mountain walls. "Dr. Cross?" Nothing. I checked each tent carefully, sleeping bags still warm, personal items undisturbed, but no people. Helena's research notes were spread across a folding table, weighed down with rocks. I picked up the last entry, dated yesterday. Asterisk, day 12. The bone arrangements have changed again overnight. Geometric patterns that weren't here yesterday morning. Tommy thinks someone is playing a prank, but we're 40 miles from the nearest person. The local elders' warnings about hungry ancestors don't seem so silly anymore. Asterisk. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the wind. I'd heard those same warnings from Nunavut elders as a kid. They always said, "Don't disturb the bone gardens, the dead don't like to be moved." I grabbed my rifle and followed, tracks leading north toward the burial sites. The snow told a story, 4 sets of boots heading out together this morning, walking fast, almost running. But about a mile from camp, something changed. The tracks became erratic, circling, crossing over each other like the team got confused or scared. Then I saw the bones. Human bones scattered across the white tundra in perfect geometric patterns. Arm bones arranged in spirals, ribs laid out like flower petals, skulls positioned at precise intervals. It looked like some kind of ritual or art installation, but the bones were old, yellowed with age. These had to be from the burial sites the team was studying. But who arranged them like this? And where was the archaeology team? I followed the bone trail as the wind picked up, making that hollow whistling sound that always reminded me of Sarah's last scream. My compass started spinning wildly, the needle dancing like it couldn't find north. My rifle felt heavier than usual, the bolt mechanism stiff from cold despite my careful maintenance that morning. That's when I heard it, a clicking sound echoing from the mountains. Not random clicks, but a rhythm, almost musical, like someone was playing the bones like instruments. The sound seemed to be calling me deeper into the burial grounds, toward whatever happened to Dr. Cross and her team. I checked my radio one more time, but got only static mixed with something that sounded almost like Inuit death chants. I was completely alone out here, 400 miles from the nearest human being. No backup, no support, no way to call for help. Just me, my rifle, and whatever was making music with human bones in the darkest part of Alaska. I should have turned back right then. Should have waited for better weather, more rangers, proper equipment. But something about those bone patterns bothered me. They were too perfect, too deliberate, and somewhere out there, 4 people needed help. I pushed deeper into the frozen wasteland. following the bone trail toward answers I wasn't prepared to find. The bone trail led me through a narrow pass between two ridges, where the wind funneled down like a freight train. Ice crystals stung my face even through my goggles. I'd been tracking for 3 hours when I found the first body. Tommy Martinez, 24 years old, graduate student from University of Alaska. I recognized him from the photo Helena had showed me during their permit briefing. He was sitting upright against a boulder, frozen solid, but that wasn't the weird part. He was positioned like he was praying. His hands were folded perfectly in his lap, eyes closed, face peaceful. Around him in the snow, human bones formed a perfect circle, arm bones, leg bones, ribs, all arranged with mathematical precision. The bones looked ancient, but they were sitting on top of fresh snow that had fallen last night. Someone had arranged them after the storm. I knelt next to Tommy, checking for signs of life, even though I knew it was pointless. His skin was gray-white, hard as stone, but his body temperature was wrong. In this cold, he should have been frozen through in an hour. Instead, his core still felt warm, like he'd died recently. That's when I noticed his gear was missing. Backpack, water bottles, emergency supplies all gone. But his wallet was still in his pocket, along with a small notebook. The last entry was scrawled in shaky handwriting. Asterisk. They're moving at night. The bones. Helena was right about the hungry ancestors. We should never have disturbed their rest. I can hear them calling my name. Asterisk. I stood up, scanning the horizon for any sign of the other 3 team members. The bone circle around Tommy seemed to shimmer in my peripheral vision, but when I looked directly at it, everything was still. Then I heard footsteps. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow, deliberate steps in the snow, coming from behind the boulder. I raised my rifle, finger on the trigger. Dr. Cross, that you? The footsteps stopped. I moved around the boulder carefully, weapon ready. Nothing there except more bone patterns in the snow spirals, mandalas, geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. But the footprints were clear. Bare feet, human-sized, with what looked like extra toes. Bare feet, in -70-degree weather. I followed the tracks for 50 yards before they just stopped. Not like the person climbed something or jumped, they just ended in the middle of an open space. No explanation, no logic to it. That's when the clicking sound started again. Click, 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 coming from ahead toward the main burial site. Rhythmic, musical, like someone playing a xylophone made of bones. I'd heard Inuit music before, but this was different. Older. Sadder. I pushed forward, my breath forming ice crystals that fell with tiny tinkling sounds. The bone patterns in the snow became more elaborate, more disturbing. Vertebrae, arranged in spiraling towers. Skulls positioned to watch each other across geometric formations. Finger bones spelling out words in a language I didn't recognize. 2 hours later, I found Dr. James Ironside. I smelled him before I saw him. The metallic scent of blood, strong enough to cut through the frozen air. He was hanging from a stunted pine tree, but not by a rope. Strips of his own skin had been braided together to make a noose, the pattern following traditional Inuit designs I remembered from museum displays. But he was still alive. His eyes followed me as I approached, mouth moving but no sound coming out. His body had been flayed with surgical precision, skin removed in long strips but organs left intact. The work was too clean, too expert to be done by animals or even a human with basic tools. "Who did this?" I whispered. His lips formed a word. Bones. Then he died. Right there, while I watched, his eyes just went empty. But here's the thing that still gives me nightmares. His body was warm. In this cold, with that much blood loss, he should have been dead hours ago. Something had been keeping him alive just long enough for me to find him. I cut him down and radioed for emergency backup, but my radio was completely dead. Not even static now, just silence. My emergency beacon wouldn't activate either, like the electronics had been drained somehow. That's when I noticed the bones around the tree. They were arranged in a perfect spiral, starting with tiny finger bones and working outward to massive leg bones I couldn't identify. The pattern seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it, shifting and rearranging itself. I heard Sarah's voice calling my name. "Vince? Vince, honey, where are you?" I spun around, heart hammering. Sarah's voice, clear as day, coming from deeper in the burial grounds. But that was impossible. Sarah was dead, cremated, scattered from our favorite hiking spot 3 years ago. "Sarah," I called back. "I'm lost, Vince. Come find me. Come help me." I knew it wasn't real. Had to be the cold, the stress, the whiskey withdrawal messing with my head. But I followed the voice anyway, because it sounded so much like her, so scared and alone. The bone patterns led me deeper into the ancient burial site, where generations of Nunamiut had laid their dead to rest. The clicking sounds got louder, more complex, like an entire orchestra of bones playing a funeral song. And somewhere in that frozen wasteland, something that wore my dead wife's voice was leading me toward the 2 remaining members of the archaeology team. I should have turned back, should have hiked out and called for a full search and rescue team with proper equipment and backup. But Sarah's voice kept calling, kept pleading for help, and I couldn't abandon her again. Not again. Sarah's voice led me to a depression in the tundra, where the ancient Nunamiut had built their largest burial ground. Hundreds of stone markers dotted the frozen earth, each one marking a grave that had been undisturbed for centuries. Until now, the archaeology team had been busy. Excavation sites peppered the area like open wounds, with bones and artifacts scattered around measuring stakes and photo equipment. But something had gone wrong. The dig sites looked like they'd exploded from within, dirt and bones thrown everywhere in violent sprays. I found Dr. Helena Cross in the center of it all. Part of her, anyway. Her legs were still attached to her torso, but everything else had been taken apart piece by piece. Arms separated at each joint, skull removed cleanly from the spine, ribs spread out like wings. But the worst part was that her pieces had been incorporated into a massive bone sculpture that rose 15 feet into the air, a sculpture that was growing. As I watched, animal bones from around the burial site began, crawling across the ground like spiders, adding themselves to the structure. Caribou ribs clicked into place between human finger bones. Wolf skulls nested perfectly between Helena's separated shoulder blades. The whole thing moved with a life of its own, rebuilding itself continuously. And Helena was still conscious. Her eyes tracked my movement, lips moving in silent screams. The bone sculpture had kept her alive somehow, using her body as a foundation while it grew around and through her. "Vince," she whispered when she saw me, "don't disturb the bones." That's when I saw the 4th team member. Maria Santos was being built into the sculpture as I watched. Bones erupted from her skin like flowers blooming in fast motion, her skeleton pushing outward while she screamed. Her bones joined the growing structure while her organs fell away like discarded clothing. I raised my rifle and fired 3 shots into the center of the bone mass, hoping to somehow stop whatever was happening. The bullets passed right through, clattering harmlessly against the stone markers behind it. The sculpture turned to look at me. It didn't have eyes, just empty sockets where dozens of different skulls had been fitted together. But I could feel its attention like ice water in my veins. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere at once, from the bones, from the wind, from inside my own head. Asterisk, you disturbed our rest. You brought the bone thieves to our sacred place. Asterisk, the voice was ancient, speaking accented English like the old Nunamiut elders. But underneath it was something else, the sound of 1,000 bones grinding against each other. "I'm here to help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not with the archaeology team." Asterisk. "You are all the same. You take our bones. You steal our stories. You wake the sleeping dead." Asterisk. The sculpture began to move toward me, each step making the ground shake. As it walked, bones from the man, disturbed graves rose up and joined it, making it taller, broader, more terrifying. I could see centuries of remains flowing into its structure, warriors, hunters, mothers, children, all incorporated into this guardian spirit. This torn rack. I backed away, but more bone sculptures were rising from other parts of the burial ground. Smaller ones, made from single skeletons, walking like jerky marionettes. They moved to surround me, cutting off escape routes. That's when I heard Sarah's voice again, but closer now. "Vince, I'm right here. Look at me." I turned and there she was. My wife, standing 20 feet away in her favorite hiking clothes. She looked exactly like she had 3 years ago, before the avalanche. Same blonde hair, same green eyes, same smile that had made me fall in love, but she was made entirely of bones. Human bones held together with sinew and cartilage, articulated perfectly to create a moving skeleton. When she walked toward me, I could hear every joint clicking and grinding. When she smiled, gaps between the bone teeth showed empty darkness. "You killed me, Vince," Bone Sarah said in my wife's exact voice. "You were drunk, you made a bad choice, you murdered me." "That's not. I didn't mean. You left me to die under tons of snow. Do you remember my screams?" I did remember. Every night, I remembered. The guilt had been eating me alive for 3 years. And now it was standing in front of me, wearing my wife's bones. But Sarah had been cremated. These bones couldn't be hers. "You're not real," I said. "You're just using my guilt against me." Asterisk. "Guilt is the strongest bone of all." Asterisk, the Tornrak replied through Bone Sarah's mouth. Asterisk, it holds everything together long after death. Asterisk, the smaller bone figures closed in around me. I could see they were made from the disturbed graves ancient Nunavut hunters and their families, forced to wake up and defend their resting place. Their eye sockets glowed with cold fire, and they moved with purpose. I fired my rifle at the closest one, aiming for what I thought might be a weak point. The bullet shattered a rib bone, but the skeleton just picked up a caribou rib from the ground and clicked it into place like a replacement part. They were getting closer. In seconds, they'd be close enough to grab me. That's when I remembered what the Nunavut elder had told me as a kid. The Tornrak doesn't want to hurt people, it just wants its bones back. If you give freely what was taken, it will accept the gift. The archaeology team had stolen bones from the burial site. Helena's notes mentioned taking samples, photographs, measurements. They'd disturbed graves that had been peaceful for centuries. But I wasn't part of their team. I was just trying to help. "Wait," I shouted. "I didn't take anything. I'm here to find them, not steal from you." The bone figures paused, just a few feet away. The main Tornrak tilted its massive skull head, considering. Asterisk, "You carry death with you." Asterisk, it said. Asterisk, "You reek of guilt and sorrow. You belong with us." Asterisk, "Maybe I do," I admitted. "But first, let me make this right. Let me return what they took." I looked around the excavation sites, trying to figure out what the archaeology team had removed. There a collection table with bone samples in labeled bags, artifact trays full of carved items, photography equipment still set up around a partially excavated grave. "I'll put everything back," I said. "Every bone, every artifact. I'll restore the graves." The Tornrak considered this. Around me, the smaller bone figures waited for its decision. Asterisk, "You cannot return the stolen dead." Asterisk, it finally said. Asterisk, "But you can join them. You can guard this place as we do, for eternity." Asterisk, that's when I understood. The Tornrak wasn't just a monster, it was a guardian. These were the spirits of ancient Nunavut people, still protecting their burial ground after death. They'd been sleeping peacefully until the archaeology team woke them up by disturbing the graves. And now they wanted me to become one of them. Bone Sarah stepped closer, reaching out with skeletal fingers. "Stay with me, Vince. Make up for what you did. Protect this place forever." I looked at my wife's false bones, at the massive Tornrak looming over me, at the circle of ancient guardians waiting for my decision. Part of me wanted to say yes. I'd planned to kill myself anyway after this mission. At least this way, my death would serve a purpose. But something about the whole situation felt wrong. The real Sarah would never want me to give up. She'd want me to fight, to survive, to find a way to make things right without destroying myself. I had to try something else. "There's another way," I said. "Let me be the guardian while I'm alive. Let me protect this place from future disturbances without becoming part of your bone army." The Tornrak paused, considering this offer. And that's when everything went completely insane. The Tornrak's massive bone head tilted toward me, and I could feel its ancient intelligence weighing my offer. Around us, the smaller bone guardians waited in perfect silence, their empty sockets glowing with cold fire. "A living guardian has failed before," it said in that voice like grinding bones. Asterisk, "They grow old, they die, they forget their promises. Only the dead are eternal." Asterisk, "But the dead can't explain things to people," I argued. "They can't warn them away, they can only kill." The truth was starting to make sense. For centuries, This Tornrak and its bone army had been protecting the burial ground by killing anyone who got too close. But the modern world didn't understand the warnings. People like the archaeology team just saw it as a research opportunity. The bone thieves understood our warnings, the Tornrak replied, gesturing toward the remains of Helena's team. They came anyway. They took anyway. They died anyway. Bone Sarah moved closer, her skeletal hand reaching for my face. Join us, Vince. You're already dead inside. You've been dead since you killed me. I jerked away from her touch, and that's when I noticed something important. The bones making up her body, they weren't from the burial ground. They were too white, too fresh. Some still had scraps of flesh attached. These were Helena's bones, Maria's bones, the archaeology team's remains, assembled into the shape of my dead wife and animated by my guilt. You're not Sarah, I said. You're just wearing pieces of the people you killed. Does it matter? The Tornrak asked. Your guilt calls to her. Your sorrow gives her shape. She is real because you believe she is real. The massive bone sculpture took another step toward me, and I could see the full horror of what it really was. Not just ancient Nunamute bones, but centuries of kills. Explorers, hunters, researchers, anyone who disturbed this place had been incorporated into its growing mass. And now it wanted to add me. I backed toward the edge of the burial ground, but more bone guardians rose from the disturbed graves to block my escape. I was surrounded by an army of the dead, all controlled by this ancient spirit that saw me as just another grave robber. That's when my rifle jammed. I tried to work the bolt, but the mechanism was frozen solid, not from cold, from something else. Ice was forming on the metal, even though I'd cleaned and oiled it that morning. The Tornrak was using some kind of supernatural cold to disable my weapon. Okay, I said, dropping the useless rifle. You want to talk about guilt? Let's talk about guilt. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Sarah's wedding ring, the one I'd carried for 3 years. I killed my wife, I said loudly. I was drunk, made a bad call about snow conditions, and caused the avalanche that buried her. I've wanted to die, every day since then. The bone guardians stopped moving. Even the Tornrak seemed to be listening. But you know what Sarah would say if she could see this? I continued. She'd say I was being an idiot. She'd say killing more people won't bring her back or make anything right. Bone Sarah's jaw opened in a soundless scream of rage. You want to punish someone for disturbing the dead? Punish me. I'm the one who's really guilty here. But let me do it right. I pulled out my emergency flare gun and pointed it at my own head. I'll join your bone army, but only after I've made sure no one else ever disturbs this place. Give me time to set up proper warnings, legal protections, maybe a fence around the whole area. Then I'll come back and pay for what I did to Sarah. The Tornrak considered this. Its massive skull head turned toward Bone Sarah, who was flickering now like a bad television signal. You would sacrifice yourself for strangers? For people who might disturb us again in the future? I'm sacrificing myself for Sarah, I said. The real Sarah, not this bone puppet you made from my guilt. She always wanted to protect things, animals, nature, sacred places. This is what she would want. Bone Sarah let out a wail that shattered the ice on nearby rocks. Then she began to fall apart, the stolen bones from Helena's team collapsing back into scattered pieces. The Tornrak grew larger, incorporating her bones into its massive frame. You speak of protection, but you carry death. Your guilt feeds us. Your sorrow makes us strong. Why should we trust the words of a bone killer? That hit me like a physical blow. Bone killer. That's what I was, wasn't it? I'd killed Sarah as surely as if I'd pushed her under the avalanche myself. But then I remembered something else the Nunamute elder had taught me. The ancestors don't want revenge. They want respect. Give them honor, and they will give you peace. I knelt in the snow and pulled out Sarah's ring. I offer you this, I said formally, the most precious bone I carry. My wife's wedding ring, blessed by our love, cursed by my failure. Take it as payment for the disturbance caused by the archaeology team. The Tornrak loomed over me, considering. And I offer you myself as guardian, I continued, not as a bone puppet, but as a living protector. Let me spend my remaining years making sure this place stays sacred. When I die naturally, you can decide if I'm worthy to join your eternal watch. The ring felt heavy in my palm, warm from being carried close to my heart for 3 years. A living guardian grows weak. A living guardian makes mistakes. Yeah, I said, but a living guardian can also learn, can adapt, can find new ways to protect what matters. I placed Sarah's ring on the ground between us and stepped back. I can't bring back the people your team killed, I told the Tornrak. But I can make sure their deaths mean something. I can make sure this never happens again. The massive bone sculpture reached down with one skeletal hand and picked up the ring. As its fingers closed around the small gold band, something changed. The cold fire in the bone, Guardian's eye sockets dimmed. The constant clicking and grinding sounds softened. Very well, the Tornrak said finally. You may try to protect this place as a living guardian. But know this, if you fail, if others disturb our rest, you will join us in ways that make death seem like mercy. The bone guardians began sinking back into the earth, returning to their disturbed graves. The Tornrak itself started to disassemble, individual bones separating and floating back to their original resting places. But before it was completely gone, it spoke one last time. Your wife's spirit is not here, living one. Her bones were returned to ash, her soul to peace. The guilt you carry is your own creation. Release it, or it will destroy you more, surely, than we ever could. Then I was alone in the burial ground, surrounded by empty excavation sites and scattered equipment. The bodies of the archaeology team were gone, their bones reclaimed by the Tornrak. Even the bloodstains had disappeared, leaving only disturbed earth and a few broken tools. I spent the next 6 hours carefully restoring every grave site, replacing every displaced stone marker, returning every artifact to its proper place. As I worked, the unnatural cold began to lift, and my equipment started functioning normally again. By sunset, the burial ground looked almost exactly as it had for centuries. Sacred, peaceful, protected. I made camp nearby and radioed for pickup, reporting that the archaeology team had been lost in a blizzard with no survivors found. It wasn't entirely a lie. But as I sat by my small fire that night, looking at the restored burial ground, I realized something important. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't want to die. The official report was simple. Dr. Helena Cross and her archaeology team had been caught in an unexpected blizzard and died of exposure. Their bodies were never recovered, presumed buried under avalanche debris. It happened sometimes in the Brooks Range. Nature was unforgiving. I didn't mention the bone sculptures or the Tornrak, or the fact that their remains had been incorporated into an ancient guardian spirit. Who would believe that story anyway? Within a month, I had convinced the Park Service to declare the entire burial ground area permanently off-limits. I cited unstable permafrost, dangerous weather patterns, and respect for Native American sacred sites. The legal restrictions went into effect immediately. I didn't retire after all. Instead, I requested transfer to a permanent station near Anaktuvuk Pass, where I could monitor the burial ground year-round. My supervisors thought I was crazy, who volunteers to spend their remaining career alone in the most remote part of Alaska, but I had made a promise to the Tornrak, and I intended to keep it. That was 2 years ago. Since then, I've turned away 17 different groups who wanted to study or explore the burial sites. Anthropologists, archaeologists, treasure hunters, thrill seekers, all of them get the same message. This area is closed, forever. Most of them listen. A few try to sneak past me. Those are the ones who find the bone warnings. I don't make them myself. They just appear human bones, arranged in spirals around my cabin, spelling out words like go and death in languages I don't recognize. The bones are always ancient, yellowed with age, but they're never there in the morning. The Tornrak's way of helping me do my job. So far, the warnings have been enough, but I know eventually someone will ignore them, will push deeper into the burial ground despite every sign telling them to stay away. When that happens, I'll do what I can to protect them, and if I can't, well, the Tornrak will handle things its own way. I still carry guilt about Sarah's death. The Tornrak was right, some burdens you have to carry yourself. But I'm not drinking anymore, and I'm not planning to join her anytime soon. I have work to do, promises to keep. Sometimes, late at night when the wind howls through the mountains, I hear the clicking sounds again. Bone music, playing songs of the long dead. But it's not threatening anymore. It's almost peaceful, like a lullaby for the sleeping ancestors. The old Nunavut elder was right about one thing. The ancestors don't want revenge, they just want respect. They want to rest in peace, undisturbed by the living world's endless hunger for knowledge and artifacts. And they want guardians who understand the difference between protecting the dead and serving them. I've learned that difference. Some knowledge is too dangerous to dig up. Some places are meant to stay sacred and untouched. Some bones should never be disturbed. My name is Vincent Darkwater, and I guard the bone gardens of the Brooks Range. If you ever find yourself in northern Alaska, near the ancient burial sites of the Nunavut people, and you see bone warnings in the snow, listen to them. Turn around, go home. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. And some guardians enforce their protection long after death. The Tornrak is still out there, sleeping beneath the permafrost, waiting for the next group of people who think they have the right to disturb the sacred dead. Don't let it be you. My name is Franklin Nightshade, but everyone calls me Frank. I've been a park ranger at Lake Clark in Alaska for 25 years now. That's a long time to spend in the wilderness, especially when you're carrying ghosts from a war that ended 3 years ago. I'm 49 years old, and my hands shake sometimes when I think too hard about Korea. The doctors call it shell shock. I call it the price you pay for coming home when your buddies don't. But I don't talk about that much. Out here in the frozen wilderness, there's nobody to talk to anyway. It's December 1956, and Lake Clark is locked solid under 10 feet of ice. The temperature dropped to 80 below zero last week. That's cold enough to freeze spit before it hits the ground. During winter, the only way in or out is by dog sled, and even that's dangerous when the aurora lights start dancing. The Dena'ina people who lived here before us white folks showed up had stories about this place. Old Charlie Wasili told me. Once about the shadow people, spirits from the other world who hunt by stealing your shadow. I laughed then, seemed like old superstition. Now I'm not so sure. My cabin sits on the south shore of the lake, about 15 miles from the nearest neighbor. That neighbor is the Morrison family, Joe Morrison, his wife Mary, and their 2 kids, Tommy and Sarah. Joe runs a trapline through the woods, catching fox and marten for their pelts. Good people. Quiet people who know how to live in the wild without making a fuss about it. I've got my radio, but it's been acting up lately. Something about the aurora messing with the signals. My supply plane isn't due back until next month, so I'm pretty much on my own out here. That's how I like it, mostly. The quiet helps with the shaking. My dogs are good company, 6 huskies, all of them tough enough to pull a sled through anything Mother Nature throws at us. They know the country better than any GPS system ever will. Rex, my lead dog, can smell trouble from miles away. Lately, he's been acting strange. Whining at night, looking out at the lake like something's moving out there in the darkness. This is supposed to be my last winter patrol. The Park Service wants me to retire. They say my nerves aren't steady enough for the job anymore. They're probably right. Sometimes I see soldiers walking through the trees, Korean boys with holes in their chests and empty eyes. The doctors say that's normal for men who've been through what I've been through. I keep my rifle clean and my emergency gear ready. 25 years in this country teaches you to be prepared. I've got snowshoes, extra food, warm blankets, and a compass that never lies. Plus my war medals in a small leather pouch. I know they're just pieces of metal, but somehow they make me feel like maybe I earned the right to keep breathing. The thing about winter up here is the darkness. We get maybe 4 hours of real daylight, and the rest is just different shades of night. But when the aurora comes out, the whole world lights up in green and blue fire. It's beautiful, but there's something wild about it too. Something that makes the hair on your neck stand up. Yesterday, I needed to check on the Morrison family. Joe usually stops by my cabin once a week to share coffee and swap stories, but I hadn't seen him in 10 days. In this country, 10 days without contact means you check on your neighbors. That's how people stay alive. I loaded my sled and got the dogs ready. Rex was nervous, dancing around and whimpering. The other dogs picked up on his mood. Animals know things we don't. That's something you learn when you spend enough time in the wilderness. The trip to Joe's cabin normally takes about 2 hours by sled. The trail cuts across the frozen lake, then up through a stand of spruce trees to where Joe built his place in a little clearing. It's a good spot, sheltered from the worst winds but close enough to water for the spring thaw. As we crossed the lake, I noticed something odd about the ice. There were dark patterns under the surface, like shadows moving beneath the frozen water. I'd never seen anything like it in 25 years. The ice was solid. I could hear it creaking and settling the way it always does. But those dark shapes looked like they were swimming down there in the blackness. Rex kept looking back at me, like he wanted to turn around and go home. I should have listened to him. When I reached Joe Morrison's cabin, I knew something was wrong. No smoke coming from the chimney, no light in the windows, and it was too quiet. Even with the wind, you should hear something from a family of 4 living in a small cabin. Kids laughing, voices talking, boots stomping on the wooden floor. But there was nothing. I called out as I approached. "Joe, Mary, it's Frank Nightshade." My voice sounded small in all that emptiness. The dogs wouldn't go near the cabin. They stopped, about 50 yards away, and wouldn't move another step. Not even when I shouted at them. I took my rifle and walked up to the front door. It wasn't locked. Nobody locks doors out here. What's the point when your nearest neighbor is 15 miles away? I pushed it open and went inside. They were all there. Joe sitting at the kitchen table with his coffee cup in front of him, like he was just taking a break from morning chores. Mary by the wood stove, still holding a dish towel. Tommy and Sarah on the floor near their toy box, playing with carved wooden animals, but they weren't moving. They weren't breathing. They were dead. The strange thing was, they looked peaceful. No wounds, no blood, no signs of violence. They just looked like they'd fallen asleep all at the same time. Joe's coffee was still warm. The fire in the stove was still burning. Whatever happened to them had happened fast and recent. I checked each one for a pulse, even though I knew what I'd find. Nothing. Their skin was cold, but not frozen. Their eyes were open but empty, looking at nothing. It was like someone had just reached in and turned off the light inside them. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The cabin was full of bright light from the aurora dancing outside the windows, green and blue fire lighting up everything. But the Morrison family cast no shadows, none at all. Not Joe, not Mary, not the kids. The light fell on them from every direction. But there were no shadows on the floor, no dark shapes on the walls behind them. That was impossible. Everything casts a shadow when there's light. Even a ghost would cast a shadow. But these people, these dead people, had no shadows at all. I backed out of the cabin fast. My hands were shaking worse than usual, and it wasn't from the cold. 25 years in the wilderness, and I'd never seen anything like this. I'd found dead hikers before, people who got lost in storms or fell through ice or just ran out of luck. But they always had shadows. Outside, I noticed something else. There were footprints in the snow around the cabin, but they were wrong. They looked like regular boot prints, but they didn't have any shadow in them either. Even though the aurora was bright enough to read by, these footprints were just flat impressions with no depth to them. I followed the trail. It led away from the cabin, across the clearing, and down toward the lake. But as I got closer to the water, the footprints started to fade. Not like they were getting covered by snow, but like they were just dissolving into nothing. At the lake shore, the trail disappeared completely, but I could see those dark shapes moving under the ice again, bigger now and more active. They were swimming in patterns, like they were dancing to music I couldn't hear. Rex started howling. Not the normal howl dogs make when they're lonely or excited, but something desperate and afraid. The other dogs joined in, and the sound echoed across the frozen lake like a warning. I should have left then. Should have hitched up the dogs and raced back to my cabin to try the radio, maybe get a message to the authorities somehow. But something kept me there, staring out at those moving shadows under the ice. That's when I saw my first one. It started as just a darker patch in the already black water under the ice. But as I watched, it began to take shape. First, just a vague outline, then more defined. It looked like a person walking along the bottom of the lake, but there was something wrong with the way it moved. Too smooth, too fluid, like it was floating instead of walking. The shape came closer to the surface. I could see it clearly now through the ice. It was definitely human-shaped, but it had no features. No face, no details. Just a black outline of a person, like a shadow that had torn loose from whoever cast it. The thing stopped directly below where I was standing. And I swear it looked up at me. Even though it had no eyes, no face at all, I could feel it watching me, studying me. Like it was deciding whether I was worth the trouble. Then it started moving toward the shore. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. I ran back to the dogs as fast as my legs would carry me. Rex was already turning the sled around, ready to go. Smart dog, smarter than his owner. As we raced across the lake toward home, I looked back once. The ice where I'd been standing was cracked in a perfect circle, like something had tried to push through from underneath. And I realized that my own shadow looked a little fainter than usual. The next morning, I tried the radio again. Nothing but static and strange sounds that might have been voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize. The aurora had been dancing all night, brighter than I'd ever seen it, and the electromagnetic interference was making communication impossible. I couldn't stop thinking about the Morrison family, about their missing shadows and those empty eyes. I kept telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe they'd died from carbon monoxide poisoning. That would explain the peaceful look on their faces. As for the shadows, well, maybe the aurora light was playing tricks on my eyes. But I knew I was lying to myself. Rex wouldn't eat his food. He just sat by the door, whining and looking out at the lake. The other dogs were restless too, pacing around the cabin and snapping at each other. Animals always know when something's wrong. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I had to check on the other trappers in the area. There were 3 more cabins within a day's travel, and if something was happening to people, I needed to know about it. I hitched up the dogs and headed for Pete Kowalski's place first. Pete was an old-timer who'd been trapping these woods since before I arrived, tough as leather and twice as hard to kill. If anyone could handle trouble, it would be Pete. His cabin looked just like Joe Morrison's had. No smoke, no light, too quiet. I found Pete at his workbench, hands still holding the fox pelt he'd been cleaning. Dead. No wounds, no violence, and no shadow. At Sarah Blackwater's cabin, I found her and her teenage son David sitting at their dinner table. The food was still warm. No shadows. By the time I reached Tom Hendrickson's place, I was starting to lose my grip. Tom was in his chair by the fire, his pipe still smoking in his hand. His dog was dead too, lying at his feet. Neither of them cast any shadows in the firelight. That made 11 people dead in 24 hours. All of them peaceful, all of them shadowless. I was standing in Tom's cabin, trying to make sense of it all, when I heard footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone was walking around up there. But the steps were wrong. They didn't make the creaking sounds boots should make on wooden shingles. They were too light, too smooth. I grabbed my rifle and went outside. There was nothing on the roof, but I could see tracks in the snow. They led from the edge of the roof to the tree line, but they were those same shadowless prints I'd seen before. Just flat impressions with no depth. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My own shadow was definitely fainter than it had been that morning. I could see it in the snow beside me, but it was pale and thin, like it was slowly fading away. I stumbled back to my sled. The dogs were going crazy, barking and lunging against their harnesses. They wanted to run, and so did I. But as we started back toward my cabin, I saw something that stopped me cold. There were figures moving on the lake, dark shapes gliding across the ice with impossible speed. They moved like shadows, but they were 3-dimensional, real. And they were heading straight for my cabin. I counted at least a dozen of them. They looked like people, but they had no features, no details. Just human-shaped patches of darkness sliding across the white ice faster than any living person could run. Rex was pulling so hard the harness was cutting into his chest. The other dogs were howling in pure terror. I let them run. We raced across the frozen lake with those shadow things converging on us from all directions. I could feel them getting closer. The air around us got colder, so cold that my breath froze solid and fell like tiny ice crystals. The dog's fur was turning white with frost, and my shadow, what was left of it, was getting paler by the minute. One of the shadow figures got close enough that I could see its face, or where its face should have been. Instead of features, there was just smooth darkness, with 2 spots of light where the eyes belonged. Those lights were the color of old copper, and they were looking right at me. The thing reached out with one arm. Its hand passed right through the side of the sled like it was made. of smoke, but I felt it, cold beyond description, like being touched by the empty space between stars. Where it touched me, my jacket didn't even get torn, but I could feel something being pulled out of me, something important. I fired my rifle at the closest shadow figure. The bullet passed right through it without any effect, but the sound seemed to startle them. They backed off for a moment, giving us enough space to reach the shore. At my cabin, I barricaded the door and tried to think. Whatever these things were, they were connected to the missing shadows. And somehow, they were stealing more than just shadows. They were stealing whatever it was that made people alive. I looked down at my own shadow in the lamplight. It was barely visible now, just a faint gray outline that flickered like a dying flame. Outside, I could hear them circling the cabin. Their footsteps were soundless, but I could feel them moving around the building, testing the walls, looking for a way in. And then I heard something that made my heart stop. Voices. Human voices calling my name. Frank. Franklin Nightshade. Come out, Frank. I recognized those voices. They belonged to people I'd known. People who were dead. The first voice was Joe Morrison. Frank, why didn't you save us? We trusted you. Then Mary Morrison. You could have warned us, Frank. You knew they were coming. And then a voice that made my knees go weak. A young soldier's voice, speaking with a Korean accent. Sergeant Nightshade, why did you leave me behind? That voice belonged to Private Kim Sung-ho, a kid I'd served with in Korea, a kid who died because I made a choice to save myself instead of helping him. The voices kept calling, and with each word, I could feel more of my shadow slipping away. The voices outside my cabin kept calling all night long. Dead people I'd known, dead soldiers I'd served with, all of them asking me the same question. Why didn't you save us? By dawn, my shadow was almost completely gone. I could barely see it even in direct lamplight. And I was getting weaker. My hands shook worse than ever, and I felt like something vital was draining out of me with each breath. That's when I understood. These shadow things weren't just stealing shadows. They were stealing the part of people that made them alive, the part that connected the body to the soul. And they were doing it to me. I also understood something else. This wasn't random. These things had come for me specifically. All those dead trappers were just practice. I was the real target. When the sun came up, the voices stopped. But I could still feel them out there, waiting. The aurora was still dancing in the sky, even though it was daylight. That wasn't natural. The aurora only appears at night, but these things were using it to stay manifested during the day. I tried the radio one more time, nothing but static and that strange whispering in foreign languages. But this time, I recognized some of the words, Korean words, words I'd heard soldiers use when they were dying. That's when the pieces finally clicked together. The shadow people weren't random spirits or monsters. They were the ghosts of people who died with unfinished business. People who died because someone else had failed to save them. And they were drawn to people like me, people carrying guilt about the deaths of others. All those trappers hadn't died because they were unlucky. They died because I was here. The shadow things had been feeding off them, getting stronger, preparing for their real target. Me. Private Kim Sung-ho had been 18 years old when he died in Korea. I was his sergeant, responsible for keeping my squad alive. When the Chinese attacked our position, Kim got pinned down by machine gun fire. He called for help. I heard him calling my name. But there were 6 other soldiers in immediate danger, and I could only save some of them. I made a choice. I saved the others and left Kim behind. It was the right tactical decision. It saved more lives. But Kim died alone, calling my name, and I never forgave myself for it. Now he was back, along with all the other people who died because I couldn't save everyone. They were using my guilt to manifest in this world, stealing shadows to gain physical form. The cabin door started to crack. They were coming in. I could see them now, even in daylight. Dozens of shadow figures pressing against the walls, pushing through the wooden boards like they were water. And at the front of them was Kim Sung-ho. He looked exactly like he had the day he died, young, scared, but determined. Except he was made of living darkness, and his eyes glowed with that same copper light. "Sergeant Nightshade," he said in perfect English. "You left me behind." "I had to choose," I whispered. "I couldn't save everyone." "But you didn't try to save me. You chose the others because you thought they were worth more. That wasn't true. I'd chosen them because they were closer, because I could reach them faster. But looking at Kim's shadow form face, I realized the truth didn't matter. What mattered was my guilt, and the guilt was feeding these things. I'm sorry, I said. I should have found a way to save you all. Sorry isn't enough, Kim said. The other shadow figures were pressing closer. You have to join us. You have to understand what it feels like to be abandoned. I felt the last of my shadow slipping away. My body was getting cold from the inside out, and I could barely keep my eyes open. In a few more minutes, I'd be as dead as the Morrison family. As dead as Kim Sun-ho. But then I realized something. These shadow things weren't just feeding on my guilt. They were trapped by it. Kim couldn't move on because I wouldn't let go of what happened. All these years, I'd been carrying him around with me, never allowing either of us to find peace. You're right, I said to Kim. I did fail you. But keeping you trapped here isn't going to fix that. The shadow figures paused. Kim's glowing eyes flickered. I can't bring you back to life, I continued, and I can't change what happened, but I can stop making it worse. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the leather pouch containing my war medals. I'd been carrying them for luck, but really I'd been carrying them as reminders of my guilt. Reminders of the men I couldn't save. I forgive myself, I said out loud. And I'm letting you go. I threw the medals into the fireplace. As they began to melt in the flames, something amazing happened. Kim's shadow form started to change. The darkness began to fade, replaced by a soft, warm light. Thank you, Sergeant, he said, and for the first time in years, he sounded peaceful. I can rest now. One by one, the other shadow figures began to fade as well. All the guilt I'd been carrying, all the people I thought I'd failed, I let them all go. As the last shadow disappeared, I felt my own shadow flowing back into me like water filling a dry well. The weakness left my body, the shaking stopped, and for the first time since Korea, I felt truly alive. The aurora faded from the sky, and the radio crackled back to life. I managed to contact the Park Service and report the deaths of the trapper families. When the investigation team arrived 3 days later, they found exactly what I expected them to find: carbon monoxide poisoning. All 4 families had died from faulty heating systems that leaked deadly gas into their cabins. Peaceful deaths. No violence, no mysterious circumstances. The investigators congratulated me on my thorough report and recommended improvements to cabin ventilation systems throughout the park. They never mentioned the missing shadows, because by the time they arrived, all the shadows had returned. Death had released the trappers from whatever supernatural force had been draining them. Their bodies looked normal again, casting proper shadows in the winter sunlight. I didn't try to explain what had really happened. Who would believe a story about shadow-stealing spirits and guilt-powered manifestations? I was already on thin ice with the Park Service because of my war nerves. Reports of supernatural encounters would have gotten me committed to a mental hospital. But I knew the truth. The shadow people had been real. They'd been feeding off my guilt for years, growing stronger every time I relived that day in Korea. The electromagnetic activity of the aurora had given them the power to manifest physically and start killing people. All those innocent families had died because I couldn't forgive myself for choices I'd made in wartime. The strange thing is, after I let go of that guilt, my shell shock got better. The shaking stopped. The flashbacks faded. I still remember Korea, and I still mourn the men who died there. But I don't carry their ghosts around with me anymore. I decided not to retire after all. The Park Service was happy to let me stay, especially after I'd handled the trapper investigation so professionally. I'm good at my job, and this country needs people who understand its dangers. But I keep an eye on things now. I watch for signs of unusual aurora activity, for reports of people dying without apparent cause, for animals acting strangely around certain areas. Because I know the shadow people weren't unique to me. There are other people out there carrying guilt they can't release, and guilt like that can manifest in dangerous ways. Last month, I heard about some strange deaths near Denali. Hikers found dead without any obvious cause, their bodies peaceful but somehow diminished. The official report blamed altitude sickness, but the description sounded familiar. I've been wondering if I should drive up there and check it out, Maybe talk to the local rangers, see if any of them are carrying ghosts from old wars or old mistakes. Sometimes people need help letting go of the past. The lake is quiet now, the ice has normal shadows under it, and my dogs don't act nervous when we cross it. But on clear nights, when the aurora comes out to dance, I still remember what it felt like to have my shadow stolen piece by piece. I remember Private Kim Sung-ho and the choice I made that day in Korea. The difference is, now I can remember without drowning in guilt. I made the best decision I could with the information I had. Men died because war is terrible, not because I was a failure. And sometimes, accepting that truth is the only way to honor the dead. My name is Franklin Nightshade, and I guard a lake in Alaska where shadow people once walked. They're gone now, but I stay vigilant. Because guilt is a powerful force, and in the right conditions, it can take on a life of its own. The wilderness is full of dangers most people never think about. Cold that can kill you in minutes. Ice that can swallow you without a trace. Weather that can change from calm to deadly in the blink of an eye. But the most dangerous thing you can bring into the wilderness is a guilty conscience. Because out here, in all this empty space, your ghosts have room to grow.